Ladies and gentlemen, hello to everybody wherever you are joining us. Welcome to our event, Thermal Technologies for the Energy Transition. This event is organized by the two associations, the German Energy Storage Systems Association and the German Association for Concentrated Solar Power, and is an official partner event of the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue, a big conference that went on the last 2 days in Berlin. But we are not in Berlin today. We are here at the trade fair Volta-X in Stuttgart. Why that? The conference was all about climate change and climate action. As our Minister of Economic Affairs and Climate Protection said yesterday in his keynote speech, we need climate action, and climate action demands actually action, and that action is not sitting around and wait. And this is what we want to show you today. We want to demonstrate you examples of action, technology solutions that can contribute to climate protection, especially in the heat sector. And this is why we are here with thermal technologies. My name is Juliane Hinsch. I'm from the German Association for Concentrated Solar Power. And I'm here with Beatrice Schulz from the German Association for Storage Systems Association. Yeah, Beatrice, here you go.
Thank you for the introduction, Juliane. I'm really happy that everybody joined us online and at Volta-X here today as well. If you are here in Stuttgart, you might have already had the chance to visit some of the companies that are presenting here today, but there are actually many more here that you can see, and there are already a lot of technologies ready on the market for the heat sector, being able to provide solutions for both the industry and the energy infrastructure, being it for heat or electricity. So I'm really looking forward to all participation from our speakers today and hope to get into touch with you later.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for your kind introduction. And now I'm very happy to welcome our first speaker on this panel. Not here in Stuttgart today. He is sending from elsewhere. It's Michael Taylor from the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and he is Senior Analyst, Renewable Cost Status and Outlook. And yeah, I'm happy to give you a warm welcome. He will give us some new numbers on where we stand now. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Juliana and Beatrice, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to join you here virtually today. I'm going to try share my screen with you right now so you can see my slides. And if someone could just confirm that that's working A-OK, that would be great. Looks like it is. I'll take it as a given. So what I want to do today, and I'm very happy to be able to share this with you, is talk to a little bit about some of our latest analysis and the role of solar thermal technologies in the energy transition. As mentioned, the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue is a very important event on the climate and energy calendar, but also for IRENA, and we released our World Energy Transition Outlook 2023 preview indeed just a couple of days ago. And so I'll give you a sneak peek at that as well. But let's get right into my presentation. So last year was something else. And it really is, I think, a wake-up call if we look at it from two interrelated perspectives. Obviously, the IPCC AR6 reports gave us a very clear update of where the science is, not only around climate change, but progress in adaptation and mitigation as well. And at the same time, we had a fossil fuel price crisis, a somewhat shocking reminder that energy security is not abstract, and our exposure to volatile fossil fuel prices has real-world costs that we need to incorporate into our policy making. Which is important because we're actually lagging quite seriously in terms of progress across the board. That's if we consider power generation capacity additions from renewables, the grid investments that we need to future-proof that system, etc., right down to the direct use of renewables in end uses, which again comes back in part to a lack of progress with solar thermal technologies. So that may seem daunting, and we may feel a little bit confused about where to start, but actually, if we look a little closer, sometimes things are not as complicated as they really seem. So here you can see the evolution of the levelized cost of electricity, and this is a weighted average across Europe for both onshore wind and solar photovoltaic through to 2021. Unfortunately, I can't share with you our latest numbers, but for 22, because we're still finalizing them. If we overlay the PPA results and some of our analysis of the impact of equipment costs, we see a meaningful increase, but that's to be confirmed by project level data, which we're working on now. However, the situation isn't really that complicated. We may have seen a slight increase in the cost of renewable power generation technologies, but of course the sharp increase in fossil fuel prices outweigh that by many orders of magnitude. So there is some clarity, I think, that the crises we face, whether it be related to climate change and the dangerous and economic costs and human suffering that will entail, and the energy sector transition, we need to use this period of crisis to really take things up another level, make a step change, and work on the pathway that we've laid out in the World Energy Transitions Outlook that shows that there's a technical pathway, which is both there's a pathway for an energy sector transition, which will keep us on track to achieve the Paris Agreement goals if we act. And that's both technically feasible with the technologies we have today or know we can develop in the period available to us, and economically feasible as well. But as mentioned, we're not on track because the scale is really of another level. And you can see that here across a number of metrics, which we've mapped in the World Energy Transitions Outlook. So we need to up our game. And that's true not only for the power sector, where realistically we've actually made the most progress, but also in the end use sectors. So why in particular solar thermal technologies can be an important solution as we move forward. But again, investment needs to scale. Supply chains need to be built up. The people skills need to be brought into play as well and scaled up as well. So this is not an easy situation we find ourselves in, but we do have the levers that we need. Very quickly, in terms of the cost reductions, last year we still saw at a global weighted average level, the levelized cost of PV, offshore wind and onshore wind decline predominantly because of the impact of China having such a large share of deployment. And putting that in context, in this chart, you can see the levelized cost of electricity between 2010 and 2021 by technology. So for solar and wind technologies, what we've seen is a dramatic cost reduction down into the range of fossil fuel-fired cost, and that's a longer-term value, so not taking into account last year's very high values, or even undercutting at a global level. And those cost reductions have been very significant. So if we talk about concentrating solar power for the power generation system, we're only at around 7 gigawatts of installed capacity. This is at a very early stage of development. And so there's a lot of focus around the costs of it being a bit higher than the other technologies. But I think the thing I'd like to point out is that where is CSP really competing? So on the left-hand side, you can see the levelized cost of electricity in Europe for in 2021 for onshore wind, solar PV, and then offshore wind. And to the right for combined cycle gas turbine plant in configurations with or without CCS, and at 50% lifetime capacity factor or 30%. There's not a huge difference between the two configurations for with or without CCS, taking into account the CO2 pricing in Europe. So even if we take a 15-year average, so not last year's values for gas, you know, there's a value proposition here in a net zero world or a Paris Agreement compliant world where CSP can play a role. And it's essentially finding value of 100 to 140 US dollars per megawatt hour, or put another way, CSP is looking to compete to provide flexible dispatchable power, essentially under euro 140 to 185 megawatt hours. That is eminently possible if we scale the industry and significantly below. And of course, you know, the situation has changed dramatically since last year. And on the right-hand side here, you see what would happen if last year's price was the norm. Clearly, we're not going to have that, hopefully, for the next 25 or 30 years. But where is the market betting that the costs have gone? So I think the figure in the middle there for CCGT is a lower value. And CSP is improving and evolving. So we've had a decade of progress to look at what's happened. And we put out a report last year about tracking essentially renewable technology innovation indicators. And you know, there's been quite significant progress. And when you put it in context of the overall level of deployment, there's no reason why we can't see greater cost reductions and performance improvements with additional efforts to deploy. Similarly, when we look at solar thermal for end users, and so we did some excellent research with Solrico a while back and the solar payback scheme, looking at the cost reductions, and this is district heating plants in Denmark. So we can see that if you grow a market, it can provide competitive heat, particularly compared to the situation we found ourselves in Europe over the last 2 years. But there needs to be certainty around the policy and regulatory framework so that the markets can grow, we can get economies of scale, experienced manufacturers, and of course, with the addition of low-cost thermal energy storage, you can make sure that you're covering quite significant shares of the overall heat demand. And similarly to CSP, we haven't really made a big effort to deploy solar thermal in these kinds of applications in the end-use sectors. And this chart, I think, illustrates that in a meaningful way that is perhaps quite helpful. So the Silkeborg Danish plant was a very large one, over 100 megawatts. It had an estimated cost of heat of around euro 33 per megawatt hours. But Denmark, for those of you who had the pleasure of visiting, know it's not the sunniest place. And there are better options for locating plants than Denmark. And you can see here the very competitive cost of heat you would get by translating the capital costs of Silkeborg into a sunnier location. But again, these opportunities need to be seized, and they're not going to happen necessarily just by the market. We need clear policies to support the development, not only of the deployment, but also the supply sector, supply chain as well. And so we need to think about this problem as more of an integrated policy question when we're looking at the decarbonisation of end users, rather than just in a technology perhaps isolated by itself. So a holistic approach, if you like. So what have we learned from the last 10 years of the energy transition? I think there's some important lessons that we need to take from it. First of all, for power generation, we've seen for solar PV, onshore wind, offshore wind, and concentrating solar power, quite remarkable learning rates for these technologies. And essentially the recent commodity and RE equipment and cost inflation does not materially alter that situation. So that has some important implications for our ambition in areas which we're not making as much progress. Essentially, as we've advanced further down the energy transition, we're learning much more what works and what can be driven down in cost. So we're essentially, as we go through this process, we're unlocking greater ambition at lower cost. We've learned that small modular technologies, and this is a very important point, with lower barriers to entry in manufacturing and development, project development, have a clear advantage because we can see a replicable process of policy support, R&D support, supply chain investment, leading to a virtuous cycle of technology improvements, cost reduction, greater employment, and start again. And we're not even really understanding yet the potential synergies and positive feedback loops that we can unlock. So all of this suggests that solar thermal technologies and others that we need to decarbonize the end-use sector can do the job for us, and conventional wisdom is often a poor guide for how costly or how long that process will take once we put the policy frameworks in place. So what do we need to do to move forward? I think the important thing is that, we were not and are not powerless to act in the face of these crises. I presented this slide last year, and I haven't changed the wording. What it means is something that's reasonably obvious, I think, to most of us that work in the sector. But I felt last year it hadn't quite been grasped by policymakers. Today, I feel a lot more comfortable with some of the recommendations in this slide and feel we're on a better track. But there's still a lot of work to do to get these messages across around the importance of a coordinated approach to the decarbonisation of the energy sector and the important role that technologies that we already have today, like solar thermal, can play if we give it the same treatment, if you like, as, say, the power generation sector. So with that, I'll stop there, and thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you found this a useful framing for the rest of the presentations that come today.
Am I on? Yeah, I'm online now. Thank you, Michael Taylor, for this overview and the newest numbers, and also these strong messages you gave to us. I mean, to be honest, it is quite shocking to hear you say we are not on track, and it's not like slightly not on track. There is a lot to do if we want to get back on track. But thank you very much also for the message. There are the technologies, there are solutions, and I think this is something that's good to know. Technical and economically, it is feasible, you said. But what is the main problem? Why aren't we on track? Why isn't it moving on, even though we had last year the great shock?
Well, I think there was an element of the policymakers being caught in the headlights with too many things to do last year to manage essentially multiple crises. I think, as I said on the last slide, is that we have moved on from that a little bit. We are seeing the pieces come together better, but there remains a lot of work to be done essentially around matching the ambition required from what we know about the energy transition requirements to avoid dangerous climate change and where we are today. So I think the big problem that I feel we see now is the lack of the near-term urgency in terms of the policy acceleration, essentially, to ensure that we get much faster onto this track. And I also think it's important to take the lessons from the past, which is that that we can, with these technologies, accelerate their deployment faster and cheaper than we anticipate today. So we need to stop making the same mistake that we think it's expensive at the start and will be for some time. The faster you go, the less it'll cost. The cheaper it is in the longer run because we avoid more costly investments later on to avoid dangerous climate change. And all these economic benefits are self-evident today in the current situation. We just need to push them from a policy perspective and make sure we get all the details right. So it has to be a holistic approach. It's not just about technology, it's about markets, institutional arrangements, and so on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael, for that answer. I have another question here from our next speaker, actually. Peter Nitz, you want to go?
Hello, Michael. This is Peter from Fraunhofer ISE. Thanks for your great work, first of all, and for the presentation. In the comparison of different renewable power generation technologies, you show CSP side by side with wind and solar PV. And I understand that the LCOE is your metrics which you compare. Do you see any chances to point out the fact that CSP, in difference to the other technologies, already comes with storage and so is a dispatchable renewable, to make that information somehow more visible in comparisons?
Yeah, so obviously in our report we highlight the levelized cost of electricity as a static metric of cost, and it doesn't represent the value of a generation technology to the system at any given time. Essentially, you can't really cheat. You have to take the underlying technology, if you like, characteristics and costs and input them into a system simulation to find out what the balance of technologies is to assure electricity supply in real time. So, and we worked with the World Bank, and we did a report that we released last year as well that looked at, if you like, the value proposition of CSP. Actually, my presentation from last year has some information on that. So LCOE is a useful proposition to understand a little bit, if you like, the order of magnitude, but not the role of an individual technology. And as you'll notice, the eagle-eyed among you will have noticed from the presentation, we think we need to scale up CSP to 24 gigawatts per year globally between now and 2030 to stay on the Paris Agreement compliant pathway at least cost, because it has that system value in terms of being dispatchable, but also providing the ancillary services to the electricity market that we need. So where there is good D&I, there's a role for CSP for sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. And we will go ahead with our program. Thank you very much for your contribution. Very much welcome. Now, we will have a closer look on the technologies and on the solutions that are available, feasible, and also economically, as Michael already said. And now we do it in the proper way. I welcome Peter Nitz as our first keynote speaker in our first part of today's program. The part we will talk about is decarbonizing industrial process and with thermal technologies. And the first panel will be opened by Dr. Peter Nitz, and he is head of department high temperature solar thermal and industrial processes at the Fraunhofer Institute for Solar Energy Systems. Here you go, Peter. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Juliana. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. So I chose the title Scenarios and Technologies because, of course, we talk about thermal technologies, but I wanted to put these into the context of transition scenarios towards a carbon-free industry. So this is the agenda of my presentation. First, I want to briefly repeat the challenge we are facing to decarbonize industry, then reflect on the thermal technologies, then talk about the transition scenarios worked out by my colleagues at the Institute, and put the thermal technologies into that context afterwards. The challenge, probably most of you have seen these kind of charts. This is a worldwide graph, but in most countries the situation is quite similar. About 1/3 of the overall energy demand is for industry, and then 2/3 of this industry demand is for heat in industry. And again, half of this demand for heat in industry is at low to medium temperatures, which is, can be achieved, for example, by solar thermal technologies. The challenge is, to tackle or to reduce the demand there and to cover it in a more carbon-free way, we have to look at efficiency measures, increase the use of waste heat, and of course, nowadays, security of supply at projectable cost is a serious argument as well. Looking at different industrial sectors, even there you can see that there is a significantly high share of low to medium temperature demand. So we see a large potential for defossilization from direct renewable supply and also through electrification by heat pumps or direct electrical heatings. Coming to the thermal technologies, the first is solar thermal. How does a solar thermal system work? We have a solar field with the collectors that collects the solar radiation, converts it into heat. The heat is circulated by the hydraulic circuit and transferred to the heat demand in industry. And in some systems, a heat storage unit is included to account for day-night differences of availability or fluctuations. If we look at different collector technologies, we have technologies suited for different kinds of temperatures we are aiming at. For the lower temperature end, we have the non-tracked, non-concentrating solar thermal technologies. And then for the medium to high temperature range, we have concentrating solar thermal technologies, which I will abbreviate with CST in the following, for concentrating solar thermal. Mostly that's parabolic trough technologies. In more southern regions, also linear Fresnel collectors or even central receiver systems can be applied. Recently, we tried to spread the word that also in Central Europe, so that in moderate climates, the concentrating solar thermal technologies like parabolic trough are able to offer high annual yields even in these moderate climates. And you see some examples here in the graph. The red curve shows the annual collector yield plotted against the mean collector temperature. And there is one dot of an actual installed demo plant in Belgium by the company Solarlight, the collector technology. And that actually meets quite well the simulations, and courtesy to my colleague Dirk Krüger from DLR for this nice plot. So this shows very nicely the potential also to use parabolic trough technology in Central Europe and our moderate climates. Now, just very recently, 3 days ago actually, a new market update was published on concentrated solar thermal or solar heat in industrial processes. You see the numbers there. And I think something's missing here. Some numbers, sorry, on the right-hand side seem to have vanished. You see that we see an in tendency increasing share of concentrating technologies, and actually by the year 2023, we have already projections from projects which are being built that we will see a 7-fold increase of implementation of concentrated solar thermal in Europe alone. So that's very promising, and we all look forward to see that installations going online. The second thermal technology I want to talk about is thermal storage. Thermal storage is the cheapest energy storage technology which is available nowadays. It makes typically use of very abundant materials and comes with a low carbon footprint as itself. And then through the decoupling of heat supply and heat demand, it offers a lot of benefits to the end users, to the energy system, mostly by also allowing sector coupling, using power-to-heat technologies and feeding cheap off-peak electricity into solar thermal storage to provide heat on demand at an end-user site. There are many different storage technologies available using different materials, aiming at different temperatures. This table gives a quick overview. On the very right-hand side, the water storage, which most of you probably have a small water tank in the basement of your house to provide domestic hot water. That can be upscaled for larger storage systems. And you see in the bottom line, the technology readiness level is quite high, mostly at 9 already or up to 9 already for most systems. But some other systems also under development still. At Fraunhofer ISE, we work at different types of these thermal storage systems. We study systems using sensible heat, but also latent heat using phase change materials. And there's different configurations, again, aiming at very, very different temperatures. Here's one example from a project realized in industry, and in the lower left graph you see a thermal storage in a size typically for an industrial application, usually coming, for example, as a container solution to be easily implemented in an industrial setting. The third thermal technology I want to present is a heat pump. And I show this very basic graph how a heat pump works because I want to point out two things. One is that we have a cooling end in the bottom, which is also the low temperature heat source for the heat pump. And then the useful heat at the upper end, at the so-called heat sink, where the working fluid is condensed and provides heat to whatever thermal user is on this heat sink side. At the same time, this means that a heat pump in principle can do both. It can cool and heat at the same time. So the economically most viable applications are those where also the cool side can be used to cool a process, which actually is the case in some, for example, processes in chemical industry, where you have both cooling demands and heating demands. So there can be very nice applications. The performance indicator is the coefficient of performance, which indicates how much useful thermal heat can be extracted from how much electrical power you need to input. But then in industry, finding the proper point of integration of such a heat pump into an industrial process is also quite a challenge and needs to be looked at quite closely and carefully. We performed a market study looking at industrial heat pumps up to 200 degrees C sink temperature and identified 55 heat pump models, of which almost 40 are at TRL above 7. So there are first implementations built and operating using different kinds of technologies. And here in this graph plotted is the sink temperature, so the temperature on the useful heat side against the heating capacity from the 100 kilowatt to the 100 megawatt range. So you see there's quite a lot of different technologies and machines out there. And typically at this large scale, this is not off-the-shelf solutions, but as I already said, the integration point in industry needs to be investigated thoroughly. And then, again, the specific choice of the suitable heat pump technology for a given application has to be chosen from this, this market. Looking at transition scenarios, I have colleagues at the Institute working on scenarios how Germany can be transformed to CO2 neutral situation in 2045, which is the target of the German climate legislation. And here you see the CO2 equivalent emissions. And this is from the modeling of my colleagues taken as a given. And they have set up models to see how would an energy system need to be transformed in order to meet this given CO2 reduction. And this is the scope of the energy system model REMOD applied by my colleagues, and this graph just indicates the complexity of this model. It includes all energy providers and all energy users in a system like Germany, so it's a quite complex model already. And here's some results. This is the overall end energy demand in Germany, and here my colleagues plotted a pre-2022 scenario against an energy security scenario. So, of course, all the numbers usually depend very much on the input you give into this model. What are the political boundary conditions? How do costs develop, etc. So there's different scenarios. But the good news is that the scenarios show some major trends appearing in most scenarios. And here there is one very small contribution, apparently a small contribution on solar heat. But already here I can mention that only the non-concentrating solar heat is implemented in these models so far. And even though the contribution looks quite small, this is many, many terawatt hours, and I will get back to that. Now looking at the process heat in industry, we see an increasing contribution of solar thermal, which still looks somewhat small against the other contributions. And as I said, there is still some work to do to include the concentrating solar thermal into these models. What we do see is that the electricity or electrification of heat will be and will become the dominating technologies, but still solar thermal will provide a significant contribution. And looking at some numbers, for the non-concentrating solar PV here for 2030 and 2050, some numbers are given. And we see, for example, just in industry, an increase to 4 terawatt hours in 2030 and 11 terawatt hours in 2050. And below I gave a rough estimate what that means in square meters of installed collector area or installed power. That means millions and millions of square meters of installed power of solar thermal. We do have some numbers for the thermal storage in district heating, which is plotted on this graph. And here you again see something like 1 terawatt hour by 2040. So again, also for the thermal storage, there's a huge potential to be implemented. And now let's reflect. We see, even in the models of my colleague, there is a certain lack of visibility of solar thermal because one of the technologies is not even yet implemented. That is work in progress. And yeah, the level of detailing, even though it's a very, very complex model, is still somewhat limited and cannot show all the combinations. And for example, thermal storage is not apparent in most of the analyses done by my colleagues. However, we see the strong increase in electrification, and it's absolutely clear that people will not buy electricity at peak hours of electricity prices to just provide heat. But in many of these cases, thermal storage will be in between implemented to make use of variable electricity prices for this heat preparation. And similarly, as on the modeling side, of course, there is also a certain lack of awareness at both end users and also at consultants and planners of energy systems. So let me conclude. More than 50% of the heat demand in industry is at low to medium temperatures, which can be covered by thermal technologies. The energy transition scenarios for Germany show that electrification will become the dominating future technology, but still solar thermal and thermal storage will play a significant role, even though they also, to create more visibility, need to be implemented in these transition modeling, and that's work in progress with my colleagues. We see this huge potential for the thermal technologies, mostly applied in hybrid solutions together with other heat supply technologies. And we see in the modeling that we are facing many terawatt hours of storage, many terawatt hours of solar thermal, meaning many millions of square meters of solar thermal to be built in the next years. But still, currently, we only have a few demo installations. So we have a ready-to-use, but still small and emerging market. We have a lack of visibility, resulting also in a reluctancy of potential end users. But on the other hand side, having still such a low market volume, we also see a quite significant cost reduction potential still with market upscale and increase of production volumes. And I think the common challenge of the community will be to mitigate this lack of visibility and spread the word that there are technologies to decarbonize industrial heat right away.
Yeah. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Peter Nitz. I won't let you go completely. You might just step aside. We will see each other again shortly. Thank you very much for your great keynote. And I will have my next speaker now. And our next speaker is Lara Stamm. She's sales engineer at the company ProTarget. And she will now talk about solar process heat in the beverage industry. Lara, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Lara Stamm, and I'm sales engineer at the company ProTarget AG, set in Cologne. We are specialized on building and designing solar thermal plants worldwide. And we do this to give our customers a solution to provide them with secure and long-term energy prices. So if you get a solar system, I can tell you your energy price for the year 2050. So yeah, if you need secure energy prices for the future, this is the right technology. So how do we do that? I give you a quick overview over our technologies. The first system that we sell is the vacuum tube system. With that, probably you've seen it on many rooftops, on private houses, but we've scaled it up for the industrial use. We can get there hot water or thermal oil up to 100 degrees Celsius. And it's really light and has the advantage that we can build it up on any rooftop or yeah, even on the ground, but it can almost be placed everywhere. Our core technology is the parabolic trough system. With that, we can provide the industry with steam and thermal oil, and we can heat it up to 420 degrees. And we at ProTarget, we especially are proud to say that we take good care of our engineering, and we have a really high standard in our materials. So the systems are very long-lasting. One thermal plant can last at least 20 years. If you take good care of it, we've even seen plants that can last over 30 years. So if you choose this technology, which is built mainly made of glass and steel, it can really last a long time, especially also in environments. For example, it's made for deserts, hail, rain, no problem for the system. But now let's look at some examples where you can use the system. Here I took 2 examples from the beverage industry. Of course, there are many other applications for the system. The first company where we installed our system was a fruit juice company. Here, the steam is used for the pasteurization process of orange juice. Also, they use it to preheat their boilers. So in the morning, you can start directly working yeah, in your company when the boiler is already set, the the right temperatures are already reached. And with this, especially in Cyprus, we can get 1.7 tons of steam per day, and we produce 16 tons of hot water per day. With this system, we also included a thermal storage, so that also overnight the company can work and can live and use the heat that we are creating during daytime. The second example is taken from the beverage industry here in Germany. Especially in the south of Germany, we have a nice DNI, so also solar thermal is really useful and really good choice in certain regions in Germany. And here we use it for a brewing process. We have very different temperature levels in the brewing process. And solar thermal can cover this perfectly. If you need temperatures, in this case, up to 80 degrees, are here also in Germany, no problem. So if you also want to combine this with a heat storage, like I said, you can have the heat whenever you need it. Or also, we can cover peak demands with this. For example, if you have complicated processes that need, I don't know, a high demand of steam only for 1 hour, this would be also the right solution for this. These were only 2 examples. Of course, solar thermal in the industry can be used in many ways. Let's think about textile, let's think about chemicals, pharmaceutical, mining industry. So there are no limits. Wherever there's process heat, you can use solar thermal systems. So, in the end, I want to thank you for your interest in our technology, and I hope that, I could catch your interest for our product.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Lara, for your short introduction in your technology and what you do. We will talk to you in a minute, or in 5 minutes to be precisely, because we will now hear Dr. Peter Kort, and he is CEO of the company Lumenion, and he will talk about decarbonizing process heat with thermal storages, and he will explain it with an example from the chemical industry. The floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much, Juliane. My name is Peter Kort. I'm from company Lumenion in Berlin. And I would like to talk about thermal energy storage. We heard a lot of things about this before. And to come to the greening process, it is one step to use thermal energy storage for this. And I would like to show an example or a solution for the chemical industry. When we look for using more renewable energies, then it's necessary to make them reliable, so that we have a supply of energy for 24 hours, 7 days a week. And here we see a picture. We see generation of electricity by wind and solar. And to use this energy, or to feed this energy into a thermal storage, then it can be used as heat later on for process heat in a temperature range between 150 and 400 degrees centigrade. The working principle is quite simple. We have a storage with a storage media. In our case, we use steel as a storage media to store the energy. And we use standard components like fans and steam generator. And this example here is for 20 megawatt hour storage. And it can be charged with approximately up to 7 megawatts. And the discharge in this case can be up to 2 megawatts, so that it can be discharged for a duration of approximately 10 hours. And in our case, we use for this 600 tons of steel. When we look to the chemical industry, or in general for the industry which needs process heat, then we see that chemical industry approximately have nearly 20% of heat consumption. Besides others, like, for example, pulp and paper, or food and beverage industry, which is also a quite good field for thermal energy storages. This is a perfect fit for this type of equipment. And when we see about the temperatures which are needed for the process heat in this industries, then we see that this medium temperature range, which is an ideal application for thermal storages between 100 and 500 degrees centigrade, is a quite substantial amount in the chemical and petrochemical industry. So what is the goal for the chemical industry? Like in other industries also, it's defossilization of the industry, and there it is especially the heat supply for the chemical industry. And of course, industry processes require a constant, secure and affordable supply of energy. And the steam, and they have a steam demand on different pressure levels. And especially medium pressure steam and low pressure steam are ideal solution for thermal storages. The challenges, as always, is that there is enough energy available, and then that electrical, or that the defossilization of the chemical industry, of course, increases the amount of electricity which is needed. This is a challenge which have to be maintained, and maybe also if we do not use thermal storages or storages in general, then it can come also to an overload of the power grid infrastructure. As always, it's not only one solution. So thermal storages are not the only one which is which can fit everything. So maybe hybrid solutions will be the better solution. So also to have some amount of combustion to use for, but this can be of course reduced more and more by using thermal storages, and so to go forward with the electrification. Here is a typical scheme for the chemical industry with different solutions, electrical, natural gas, different turbines, and here we can see that on the right side here, thermal energy storage can be one solution to decarbonize the chemical industry. So what are the key benefits? It's the thermal energy storage, like we do it, is ideal for temperatures up to 400 degrees. It can have a rapid startup. It's not toxic, no flammable materials. It has a high durability, low life cycle costs. We can also offering balancing services. Peak shaving can be done, easy integration, and it's available now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter Kort. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to ask Lara Stamm and Peter Nitz again on our small stage. It is quite small, so we have to gather together. And we will have a quick chat on what you just presented. So Peter Peter, we have two Peters here. Peter Nitz told us giving us the overview of all the scenarios that the thermal storages solar thermal, and also thermal technologies, both thermal storages and solar thermal, are still quite small in all the scenarios. What is your perception of the potential to you are in the market, Lara and Peter? Does it have to be that small, or where are we heading towards? Who wants to start?
Maybe I can take over, yeah. For the thermal or the industry process heat, when I come at that direction, we can cover with our systems around 50% of the low and medium temperature range in the industry. So if customers or the industry would change their systems, we can do a lot in terms of environment, in terms of secure, clean energy costs also. Yes, and I think there's a lot of potential in the market still, and
just not known, just not seen, or what is?
It is seen. It's getting more popular now, but again, I want to use this opportunity to take the fear from our customers. This is a really reliable system. Like I said before, we have systems that are working for now over 30 years, and with flawless, and everybody who has invested back then in renewables or in solar thermal systems are really happy nowadays. So I think people should lose the fear of new technologies and really go that step, talk to us, and we can find a perfect solution for you. So.
Yeah. Peter Kort, so the main challenges for a new technology to get into the market, to get bigger in the scenarios?
Yeah, I think everyone is talking about hydrogen, and in the temperature range I mentioned, 150 to 400 degrees centigrade, I think hydrogen is not a good solution. It will take much too long, and it's not efficient. It will be too expensive. And there are solutions like power to heat, and especially together with thermal energy storage, will be an ideal fit to maintain this field.
So we have to change the scenarios, or what do we have to do? Where are the gaps for the technologies here?
I think the scenarios give sufficient room for both technologies, even more so probably for the storage systems, because they will be part of the electrification. As I pointed out. And since electrification will be the dominating part in the future, I think also thermal storage will play a significant part there. And then for solar thermal, I pointed out, even this maybe small-looking contribution is an important contribution, supplementing. And from the low-temperature solar thermal, for example, we will also see solar thermal on the cool side of heat pump technologies. So again, there is a link between solar thermal and electrifying technologies. So I think for both technologies, hybridization and sector coupling is an issue which will be more increasing and will be more installed and more looked at in the future. And I think both technologies will profit from that.
We heard this morning that we are off track with our activities to meet the climate goals. So we need to accelerate. So what needs to be done to get these technologies more quicker in the market and to accelerate?
Yeah, I think one issue is regulatory questions. Renewable energy is cheap, but not for the customers itself. So there are grid charges, there are taxes, and I think this is one field where things have to be changed. And the other issue is, let's start with it, let's do it. I think the technologies are ready, they are developed, they can be used immediately. So people have to start with first projects, and then everyone will see how it works, and that it works well, and that it can be one step for changing the world. Yeah.
Okay, but nobody wants to be the first one, or what is the problem? When you talk with your customers, how do you convince them? So to move forward?
Especially now, we all know energy prices have risen, and nowadays we can really provide low costs in terms of heat costs. So at the moment, there is no question if this system will pay off. It will pay off in about 4 to 5 years. And afterwards, our customers, or this is what I tell the customers, the system will last for 20 years. After 5 years, you're paid off. So you only make a win-win situation. You have clean energy, secure energy costs. Also something which we've seen in the last years is something where we all thought like, okay, gas prices will never change, but okay, they can change. But with this system, you have your price and it's fixed. You know what your energy will cost you. So I think this is the biggest argument from the cost side to convince our customers that this is really the right solution for them. And also, you can store the energy, you can use it. Also, some projects are made where you can share the heat. If you have leftover or producing too much heat, you can even, for example, sell it to your neighbor, or you can use it for industry parks. So the heat, especially in the food industry or also metal industry, I think there are a lot of ways to share the energy under each other. So there are many ways nowadays to make the system work, and these are normally the arguments that I use to convince my clients that it's really flexible. So, and you also have this cost advantage, and this is normally,
Okay, yeah. What are your main arguments? How do you push?
I think there are many technologies available, many ways to solve problems. People have to be open-minded and to start with it. And I think with all the bunch of technologies, we can get better results and can reduce costs, because I think this is also something that the new technologies are also cost efficient and can reduce costs and can secure energy supply for the future. So let's start. Let's start with it.
Yeah. You're nodding? You want to?
Yeah, I think something where we probably all need to contribute is really to also spread the word into the world of all the engineering companies and all the planners and consultants, just to increase awareness on these new technologies, or, well, they are not really new, but maybe new in the market. Just to make sure that they are really considered even when new installations are planned, so that also from the side of the consultants and the planners, we hopefully see some more market activity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what would you say? Is it just awareness about the new technologies, or could it also be like, I mean, you're dealing with industry, and industry didn't do much in decarbonization in the last year. So it might be a general problem in the overall problem, not only the new technologies, but whatever efficiency measure or elder possibilities. What would you say? How do you think industry is now aware of the problem they are facing?
We see that industry is forced to reduce CO2 emissions, so they have to do something there. And in the last years, we also see rising energy prices for fossil fuels. So industry will also look for alternatives to reduce their costs, and I think the new technologies can be a solution to reduce both CO2 emissions and costs, but it's not recognized by everyone up to now. But I agree with you, it will be more and more like this, and especially multiplicators like engineering companies, consultancies will spread it in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Also, we have a current example from the textile industry. The customers more and more asking for where's the product coming from, how did the textiles get produced? Are they, what are you burning coal? Are you burning some rice husk, or are you really using the renewables? And we've seen many, in this case, textile companies who are getting extra offers from buyers and other suppliers when they switch to renewables. So the moment that they decide to do a solar thermal system is the moment when they get even more offers and their business gets far more rentable. So yes, I think this will also be a big factor in the future when people become more aware of where my product's coming from. So I think in this direction the industry has to move. So there's a lot of potential, and I think nobody can ignore this topic anymore. Of course, when I think here in Germany, when for example CO2 taxes are there and rising, also the cost side comes again. I think there's no other way to do something and to do it now and not in 10 years. So go for it.
And I am actually quite optimistic that everybody is aware now. Also the Ukraine crisis and the energy cost irritations, that really rang a bell in industry. I think everybody is aware now. We have seen that still other issues have been prioritized because there have been other irritations also in supply chain issues or whatever market issues industry has to face nowadays. So maybe still energy is not at prior number one yet, but maybe if the irritations of the current crisis will also maybe fade out in the next years, maybe energy will become, or CO2 will become the prior number one.
Also, we've noticed that governments all around the world, of course here in Germany as well, are starting to move. We're getting far better funding projects for renewable projects, also in the heat sector. And if you keep an open mind on your own system, when your government is bringing out a new program, this is really, this will really give you a nice cost advantage as well. Here in Germany, you can get up to 55% for your investment costs, so for a solar thermal system. And this is normally an argument to think about a system. So
it's good to hear that you're all optimistic, and but I think there are also measures that can be taken to accelerate. And if you could have a wish, and this is now a question to each of you, what policymakers should do to help you bring the technologies into the market, to accelerate, to scale up and to get it done. What would you do, or what would you ask for?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think a very good step forward would be if we would have exemptions for grid charges for using renewable energies. This would be a big support for the new technologies which are CO2 free.
Actually, for us, it would be nice if we could have the same advantages that also the PV currently has. For example, lower taxes, or you're getting some fees if you can get money if you feed your heat into the grid. This would also be a big advantage for customers to choose the system if they can sell also the heat to directly to the grid, to the energy providers. Also, I think we should go more on hybrid systems. For example, to look how can we combine different technologies. And I think this is not done enough at the moment. People are only looking at one solution, and they're not considering that maybe a combined system out of many technologies is would be perfect for them. For example, heat storage, solar thermal, PV, and cover the whole demand that a customer has. So I think we should, or maybe we should go more and invent and look at more at these systems.
Yeah, thank you very much. to all of you, or do you have a...
Yeah, if I can add a wish, maybe a somewhat even more ambitious CO2 pricing would maybe have the biggest leverage, because it would address all the energy consumption and even promote decisions towards renewable energies, also in industry, because typically one good investment has to be prioritized against another good investment, and then maybe renewables are second best. So CO2 pricing could do that little twist maybe in the end to accelerate even.
So we now hope that there are a lot of policymakers or consultants to policymakers in the audience that can hear the message. With that, I want to thank you very much, Lara Stamm, Peter Kort, and Peter Nitz, for your contribution here today. And we will now switch the panel. We will have new people on this panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are online again. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is now Dr. Susanne König, and she is CFO of the company Kraftblock. And she will talk about electrification of high-temperature process heat solutions for the food industry. Welcome, Susanne, on our stage here.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Susanne, co-founder and CFO of Kraftblock. Happy to be here and have the great opportunity to talk about the electrification of process heat at temperatures higher than 150 degrees Celsius. Why higher than 150 degrees Celsius? Because at lower temperatures, heat pumps are more efficient. Let me frame our example of the food technology first. Like a lot of other companies, our customer PepsiCo and Eneco defined strong ESG goals, also to reduce Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. So they asked themselves, how can we decarbonize our thermal processes? How can we make them more sustainable? And how can we make it more competitive? Kraftblock delivers the answer to those questions. It is our net zero heat system that replaces fossil-fired systems against renewable ones. Renewable electricity is transferred to heat at temperatures between 800 and 1,000 degrees Celsius. There are use cases where it exceeds even 1,300 degrees Celsius. Then, generated thermal energy is stored in our high-performance storage and can be delivered to different interesting applications, like district heating, process heat, either as hot air, thermal oil, or steam. It even can be electrified again. The buzzword here is storage power plants. Usually, we charge for only a few hours every day, when the electricity prices are really low. But we can discharge 24/7 to the process of our customer, for example, at 200 degrees Celsius. At the end, the system replaces fossil fuels and decarbonizes in just one single step. As we do not integrate any components into the storage, we are flexible in the overall design. Flexible, especially on the discharging side. That's why the Kraftblock solution can be used in various industries. What does this mean for PepsiCo? Eneco is the energy provider who sends a signal when electricity prices are very attractive. The Kraftblock system immediately starts the charging process. On the other hand, PepsiCo sends the request for heat and Kraftblock delivers. As it is a fully modular system built by 5 units, It can be charged and discharged at the same time and operates fully autonomous. The average efficiency, including auxiliary power, between transformer and heat at frying station is 95%. On customer side, most of the existing infrastructure stays as it is. In the final stage, a 22 megawatt system with a 150 megawatt hour storage is established that saves 9 million cubic meters of natural gas every year and avoids 16,000 tons of carbon dioxide, which equals a decarbonization of 98%. The same system can be used in various processes, also in other industries like pulp and paper, chemical industry, mining industry, textiles, metal production, and so on. Here are just some examples of processes in the food industry that can be decarbonized. Dairy, meat, alcohol production, sweets, coffee and tea, and all processed food. Our net zero heat subsystem fulfills all requirements from our customer. It is easily scalable, highly efficient, sustainable, and shows excellent economics. Thank you for your time listening.
Thank you very much, Susanne. Just step to the side. We will see you and talk to you later on. And now we have a small change in our program. Unfortunately, Wille from the company Rondo cannot come. But we have a substitute here, and it's Robert Fabb. He is COO at the company Carbon Clean. And you have to tell us what you're talking about, because I don't know. Here you go. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Juliane. So I'm from Carbon Clean, a small, innovative company based in Cologne in Germany, where we focus on decarbonizing industry through high-temperature energy storage. We've heard already about the problem which is facing industrial users of energy from the talk earlier today. Currently, it's particularly important that we note that the situation in the energy markets have changed drastically. People have started to realize that there is a high dependence on Russian gas, and also that this has driven gas prices to historic highs. And this is causing a real pain point for industrial energy users today. And finally, we've also heard that CO2 prices have been a clear driver in recent years. And as we see the CO2 price continuing to trend upwards, we can expect that using fossil fuels will only become more expensive in the future. We think that the solution to this is simple, and that's that you use renewable energy generated from clean, reliable sources to drive industrial processes. Of course, to do that, you need to overcome the problem of intermittency in the renewables, and we do that through storing the energy in our high-temperature thermal storage system, shown in the middle of this slide. Our technology is based around a ceramic storage material which operates at temperatures of 1200 degrees. This allows us to charge capacities between 100 and 1000 megawatt hours of energy. We do so as shown in the left of this slide. We charge the system using energy from renewables or from the grid. We use this to generate a high temperature hot air flow, which we pass through our storage modules. We can build multiple storage modules to address the very large capacities, and we charge these by increasing their temperature up to 1200 degrees. When we discharge this system, we can use the high temperature energy to drive a variety of processes. First of all, in power-to-heat processes, we can either provide the hot air directly to the industrial processes, such as drying processes, replacing the use of fossil fuel in these processes. Secondly, we can use the hot air to generate steam, which then can be used in, for example, chemical processes. Finally, we can also use the energy stored to regenerate electricity by coupling it into power generation processes, as shown in the bottom of the slide. focusing on power to heat, we address here customers in the area of large industrial heat usage. So these include petrochemical plant operators, building material plants who operate large-scale drying processes, but also application in the steel and glass industry. From the perspective of the customer, they receive a reliable supply of high-temperature heat. This can reduce the overall cost of their heat supply by 20 to 50%, and generates process heat without CO2 production. This reduction of CO2 emissions is also valuable for the customers, but also improves their image. Using this kind of application, we believe that we can offer payback periods approaching 5 years. In our second application, we integrate our energy storage system into existing thermal power plants, boosting the flexibility of these power plants and increasing their ability to incorporate increasing amounts of renewable energy into the overall grid. Finally, in the future, we believe that this technology can also be used for grid-scale energy storage. And that brings me to the end of today's presentation. I hope I've been able to give you a clear overview of the benefits and the use cases of using high-temperature thermal energy storage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robert, for the spontaneous presentation. Very welcome. And also, please step aside. And we will have our next speaker online. And I see he is already there. And I welcome Dr. Ahmed Lokurlu. He is CEO of the company Solitherm. And he will talk about solar process heat and also cooling. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Juliane. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard different applications of concentrated solar power for different heat processes, storages as well. Now I'm going to give an overview about the different application, namely cooling purposes. We exist, I have to give a short overview about our company. We exist more than 23 years. We began in the year 1999, so that we are a worldwide most experienced company in this field. We realized different projects in different countries with process heat, storages, cooling, heating, and so on, all as well, so-called 3-generation systems, producing electricity, cooling, and heating from the same plants. As I mentioned, these are the fields where we are active: cooling, heating, steam, electricity, as well desalination plants. Now, we developed over the years all the details from tracking system, online monitoring, overall energy management system, as well, of course, different mirrors for different applications. And we are able to generate at the same time cooling, steam, or hot water, so-called 3-generation. Then we can store, as also you have heard from other colleagues, via storage, high-temperature storage, so that we extend the operation time of the process in the night or for the next day. And we have our own developed unique production line, robot-controlled production, with a production capacity around 250 megawatts. We are producing at the time these collectors in Germany, in Rhineland. We have different types of parabolic trough collectors, and about 7 different types. You see some of them. And a type is via aluminium for the roof or for application of parking place. Very light, you can use. I give an example now. And there are other collectors with glass for field applications. Everything is online monitored and digitalized, and we use also artificial intelligence in our systems to manage the complex systems with our knowledge. You can use this technology, as you already heard, in different fields, hospitals, airports, industrial facilities, hotels as well.
Ahmed,
Now,
one second,
Yeah.
because I've been told there is a technical problem. Can you please check that the presentation is on?
Yeah. Can you see now other slides?
No.
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 What is the problem? Okay, just a moment. Just a moment. Okay, freigeben. Sorry, I have forgotten.
Okay, now there is something coming. Yes. Okay.
I'm so
Perfect.
sorry. Okay, once again.
Okay, now we have it. Sorry, it took some time with the technique and to get here. Okay, now we have it.
Okay.
We will see
can you
everything.
see? Okay, it's quite okay.
Perfect. Sorry.
The little history of this story from 1999 to today, 23 or 4 years. And we have developed with our colleagues, for example, from DLR, from Fraunhofer and Technical University Aachen, Jülich, and so on. And in this time, we have range developments and with different institutions and companies as well, as I mentioned, from cooling, heating, steam generation with different parameters, as you already heard from our colleagues, and also so-called three-generation plant electricity, cooling, heating. We realized already 3 plants up to now in this case, and only 1 plant for desalination in Barbados. Now, as I mentioned, we developed during this time with these institutions, which I already mentioned, or tracking systems, online monitorings, and overall energy management systems as well. Now, as I already mentioned, we are able to deliver at the same time different products. For example, steam with different parameters, pressure ratio, and temperatures, cooling. That means plus or minus, or this is possible to use this technology for absorption options and hot water and so on. We can extend also the operation time of the plant with storages. Our production line, as I mentioned, with a capacity 250 megawatts, we are producing via robot controlled production line, and we are able to deliver from Germany into the world. We are producing here in Jülich and Aachen in Western Germany. We have different kinds of collectors. As I mentioned, a part of them is via aluminium. These are the predestinated for the rooftop applications as well for parking places. We realized already many projects, and also for field application via glass. And as I also mentioned, we have this so-called digitalized online monitoring with artificial intelligence. And application cases you already received. And we realized up to now around 45 plants in 10, 12 countries for different kind of applications, process, steam, cooling, heating, or combination of them, 3-generation as well. And we received several awards for our applications. Now the main focus of my presentation is already shortly realized system in Turkey for a company, Meyer Melnhof Grafia from Austria in southern Turkey in Izmir with a cooling capacity of 3.5 megawatts. And we are able to produce in the summertime more than 80% chilled water so that we avoid reduce 80% electricity for the cooling in the summertime and 100% natural gas in the winter time. And you see here the application on the roof of the building. We need under structure of for the collectors, as I mentioned. Collectors are very light. Per square meter is the weight around 13 kilogram. As well, you can compare the weight with, for example, PV panels is not heavier. And in this case, first of all, you have to install this so-called steel structure, and then pylons, and then also, for example, another application on the roof, so that then you install the collectors on the steel construction, every type of the roofs is with this kind of application able to be used for the installation of this kind of parabolic trough collectors. And as I mentioned, is around 3.5 megawatts. And the customers are very, very happy. They reduced dramatically their energy costs. They decided before this war, and the energy prices were very low. Now is also more or less at the level which we have here in Germany, around 10 cents per kilowatt hour gas prices. So that payback period was dramatically shorter than estimated before. Yeah, you see here the conventional components. By the way, you need to install all the system as turnkey, from the collector field to the machineries, pumps, for example, cooling, the absorption chillers as well, and also this infrastructure. And as I mentioned, the system is able to cover more than 80% electricity in the summertime. They use this option about 7.5 months up to 8 months in a year. And for this mode, so-called cooling mode, and in the winter time, they use for heat production for different consumers at the facility. I am so far with my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for the presentation. And I will ask the two panelists from before, Susanne and Robert, on our stage here again, and we will discuss a bit. I would like to pose an open question to all three of you. We have now heard that the war of Russia's war against the Ukraine has been a game changer. And a lot of things happened last year. So, but for your business, what impact did that have, or what did it mean? Susanne, you can start first.
Yeah, so for the energy transition, for the heat transition especially, it's very positive, as sad it is. And so it is so the positive side is for our business as well, because there's a lot of requests from industries. They are looking for solutions. They really hoping to find the technologies to replace gas-fired boiler, to get rid of this uncertainty to be delivered, and also of the prices. So that was a good point to start all these discussions and find the best way to have the solutions for the industries. Okay.
Robert, same question to you.
So we definitely see a similar picture. We feel that there's a real difference now in that many industrial heat users have woken up to the fact that their reliable fossil fuel deliveries that they got 18 months ago is at risk, and that they need to somehow take action so that they have control over this input to their value chain. And in the background, along all of this time, you've had the decarbonization goals of these companies, which have been slowly working their way through. And I think for a lot of companies, this has really been the impetus for them to change their approach and actually to start to look at real ways that they can decarbonize their value chain.
Mm-hmm. Ahmed, what is your experience from the last year?
I see.
You're muted. We can't hear you. Still muted. We cannot hear you. Is it? Okay, maybe we continue and you might have a look. Maybe our technicians might have an idea what's going wrong. Something. They are saying you're muted, but the sign wasn't on at the We will work that out. Okay, we will continue. Maybe you can find a way to overcome this problem. Yeah, so we have heard of the potential, and yes, the interest is there. But I think there is a but, yeah? Okay,
Always.
Susanne is nodding. So what is challenging at the moment?
So we'll say we have our solutions today, now. We can implement solutions for replacing gas-fired boiler, but people are waiting for the hydrogen solution, but this will take time. And also hydrogen, there are pros and cons, and I think this for sure this is a solution for the future, but perhaps not for everybody. And to start today to replace and to decarbonize their systems. This is a challenge to make the right decision today and not waiting 10, 15 years, whatever, because there's a lot of promise in the scene that there will be solutions in the future, but they are not today. And so this is one challenge, and the other challenge is that the policy makers, that they are really need to give a reliable framework to make it happen, that the sector coupling is worth to do it. Because if you go for electrification in Germany, we see there's no business case, because the end user has to pay all the taxes and so on for electricity, and to convert it into heat, it's too costly. So there's also already a solution for hydrogen, but not yet for heat. So there's a discrimination for heat. And if the policymakers really want to make it happen, also the heat transition, then they definitely need to give these advantages they give to the hydrogen, they have to give to the heat as well. So this is the solution for us.
No.
Okay, I think Ahmed
agreeing.
is here with us again. Perfect. So where are you standing now with in the market after the war end?
I can explain a little bit. As I mentioned, we have been on the road for many years. We know a little bit all these developments, more than 24 years. The main problem were, before this war, the energy prices. On one hand, fame of the technology, identification of parabolic trough collectors with power plants, and so on and so on. And there were many reasons where we were not able to establish this technology worldwide at this level where we are. But after the situation changed, we have a quite new area. In this, we have a very, very competitive systems. That means we are able to deliver process heat at a cost levelized cost around 4 to 4.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And we have enough capacity. Now we have to push to establish now under existing conditions, not only here in Germany, in Europe, I mean worldwide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You wanted to
So from my side, I'd first of all like to echo what Susanna had said, in that it makes very little sense to have a regulatory framework in Germany in which heat generated from hydrogen can be fundamentally cheaper than heat which is generated from the same electricity that the hydrogen was generated from. Particularly when you generate the hydrogen, you also have efficiency losses. So this just seems to be completely illogical, and I think there's a real need to address this in policy. The second thing is that I think it's important to realize that customers in this area have been going through an energy crisis. They've been having a hard time. They've faced their raw materials going up and their energy costs going up dramatically. And now what politics is asking, and what we are asking these customers to do, is to make an investment in securing their energy future. And I think that it's important that there is a recognition that that's not an easy decision for them to make coming out of the current energy crisis. Their coffers are not overflowing with money to invest at the moment. So I think there is also a need for politics to address that and to create very clear incentives, investment incentives, that encourage companies to invest in CO2 neutral solutions.
Mm-hmm. Would you say there need to be more subsidies or more other kind of incentives? What would that be?
I mean, I think subsidies could be a part, but I also think that investment incentives, providing access to financing at this time, despite what may be the situation of some of these companies, would be a big step.
Mm-hmm. Susanne?
Yeah, talking about climate tech and new climate tech, there's a lot of things in the market to be solved, like the technical risk, the market risk, and so on. The other parties, like banks and insurance, are not yet there. So there's a gap in the business doing, or how to do the business. So, and there the politics have to jump in, because they need to close this gap. And then when there is enough installations in the market, then also the banks and the insurances and so on will come in when they see that it's working and that there are business models and so on and so on. But this time we need to close the gap with the solutions. If it is subsidies or if it's market prices for electricity, not the end user price, then there would be a business model, and as there is a willingness to invest also from the industry, because they really want a long-lasting solution, then there would be also investment from money coming in from the industry to solve their problem. Like we've seen in the private sector, like more and more people are buying now PV and storage system for their private sector. We will see this would be the same in the industry, but we need to close the gap.
Let's say we would close the gap and we will ramp up the market and we will boost the market and people realize what they can do. Ahmed, a question to you. If we realize that, or part of the potential, how easily can we ramp up? I mean, we are now seeing the struggling PV sector to get the production in line with all the requests. What is it in your business, Ahmed?
When you discuss with your customers' interests, everywhere more or less the same questions, the same barriers, and the same results. What does it mean? On one hand, the people want to see such applications in their country, in their field, in their and so on. That is why we discuss from time to time with politicians, with policymakers and so on, to develop boundary conditions which should be suitable for the establishing of this technology. And after, for example, when you are discussing with somebody here, And you see we have already existing plants in different, for example, Italy, Mexico, Turkey as well, and so on. And they want to see if the technology is able to be operated under our climate conditions, the first question. The second one, efficiencies and the ability and so on and so on. These are the main barriers, not only for the consumers, customers, as well for investors, for finance sector. And that is exactly the difficulties which we have, and this is exactly what we discuss all these points with policymakers, politicians, and so on. These are the main barriers for the establishing of the. On the other hand, we explain everywhere we are able to deliver already established technologies, which is be able to be operated in different countries. When you use this one in 11 countries, you are able to be to use also in the 12th country. But you have to show. These are the barriers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, able to deliver, that's a question. How much? I mean, let's talk about supply chains now, because this is getting a big problem in different sectors, PV and whatever. So how are the supply chains? Would we have similar difficulties also with thermal storages or solar thermal? Who wants to start?
Yeah.
Ahmed, yeah,
okay.
you go.
Yeah, okay. When you are going to deliver these systems, components, you have to produce them. And you have subsidiary companies from different countries, mainly from Germany, Belgium, Italy, Turkey, and so on. At the time, we have no any difficulties regarding the delivering of the components which we need. Which are the components? Main components are, for example, aluminium, glass, for example, electronic components, and also software programs, which are our own developments. And that is why we have at the time, not any difficulties to deliver exactly these numbers which I mentioned, not only here in Germany, I mean worldwide.
Mm-hmm. What about thermal storages?
Yes, so a little bit the same. It's the electronic components. The steel is for us very important. It is there's a lot of supply chain in Europe, but we see that it's becoming more and more costly. So also due to all these environment issues, and so normally you want to trade all over the world for the best prices, but the good thing is that we could deliver from Germany, from Europe, from all over Europe, not only from Germany, and but it is costly. We have to see if the market is already there and ready for higher prices. Mm-hmm. So,
Robert?
Well, I mean, we are a young company and still have a lot of work to do in building up our supply chain. But certainly it's been, we've noticed in some of the prices that we're getting quoted for some of the key components that there have been significant changes, mm-hmm.
For
example, in the steel prices, as you mentioned. But with other areas, certainly when designing our system, we've tried to ensure that we're using materials and using, let's say, forms of materials which are readily available both on the domestic but also on the international market. Mm-hmm. So we've tried to make sure we minimize problems, but it's only possible so far.
Yeah, good thing. Now I will do a last round in asking each of you what would be your wish, what needs to be changed now if you can choose one thing that could accelerate your business and putting us forward. Robert, starting with you.
So, I mean, we talked a couple of times about the regulatory environment, and I think one thing that would really give a huge boost to this market within Germany is a clear classification of thermal energy storage as being free from the surcharges for grids and also taxes, which really significantly increases the prices that industrial users must pay for electricity today. So if we could change that, I think we would have a step change in how quickly we can roll out these systems in Germany.
And your biggest wish, Susanne?
Yeah, that little bit the same. To have market prices for electricity, also starting perhaps with a mixture of green and gray electricity, because it will become greener and greener and greener in future, but we need to start investing now, because we see as the capacity is not huge, we start with small installations, and they're becoming bigger and bigger, and it will take time. So if we can already start today with a framework giving us secure mandate to the investors, we can really speed up and show in 2030 huge decrease of carbon dioxide emissions already in Europe.
Okay, thank you. And Ahmed, your wish to policymakers.
I wish a lot, but only some points. For the very first pilot applications for large-scale systems to install flagship plants for example, for central heating systems, for example, food industry, for example, large-scale storage systems. When we realized some large-scale flagships projects, and the rest is our job. We are able to deliver the rest. After we will be so far. For all this, for the first step, we need suitable boundary conditions. More not.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to all three of you for being here, for giving ideas. And we will have a short break now of roughly 10 minutes. We will see each other again at 3:30, and we will start with the second part of today's presentations. See you in 9 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second part of our conference today on thermal technologies for the energy transition. And in our second part, we will now talk about the potential of thermal technologies for the heat and also the power infrastructure. And I'm happy to welcome our first keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Annelies van der Zickel. She is head of Department Thermal Process Technology at the German Aerospace Center, and as well Professor for Thermal Energy Storage at the University of Stuttgart. And she will now talk about flexible coupling of the heating and power infrastructure. The floor is yours, Annelies.
Yeah, thank you very much, Juliana, for the introduction. So we've heard a lot today about how we can use power-to-heat and thermal technologies to decarbonize heating. And what I would like to talk about now is how we can use exactly the same technology also to flexibilize also the power grid and allow us to introduce also there more renewable electricity. Because if we talk about the future energy system, a lot of the discussions go about electrification, about increasing the electrification or the electricity production from photovoltaic, from wind. And what we tend to forget is actually that half of our energy in the end is consumed in the form of heat, either as heating for buildings, either as district heating, or either in industry. And the majority of this heat nowadays is still produced using fossil fuels, burning gas, burning coal, burning oil. If we look at where we are with decarbonizing our heating sector, we've seen that so far we've reached only a penetration of 17% of renewable energy in the heating sector, compared to 46 or even 50% by now of renewable electricity generation. And if we want to decarbonize this sector, we've heard that before already a few times, we also need to work and change our technologies portfolio in the heating sector. So let's look at what options do we have. One option is, of course, solar heating using flat plate collectors or parabolic troughs, as we've seen before, and as we will also see later on a few use case examples. The other option is to take this electricity wind generation, or from photovoltaic installations, and actually use it to convert heat into electricity, either using heat pumps for the lower temperatures, or then electric heaters or electro boilers for the higher temperatures. Of course, if we electrify our heating sector, this means that we need to increase even more the electricity generation from photovoltaic and from wind installations, which is a major challenge. But using power-to-heat technologies also creates a great opportunity, because each of these technologies can be combined with a thermal storage system. And this allows us to actually operate power-to-heat installations as a flexible load. So the power-to-heat installation can convert or absorb electricity from the electricity grid when we have a high penetration of renewable electricity, store it in the thermal storage system, and then use for later use. If there's not enough electricity in generation from renewables because the wind is not blowing or the sun is not shining, we can just ensure that we still have heat supply based using the storage. And this enables us actually to operate this power-to-heat components combined with storages as flexible loads and allow for a more cost-effective integration of large shares of renewable electricity, especially when we compare with batteries. A second advantage is that thermal storages typically use materials which are benign or widely available, and we don't have any issues with critical resources or supply chain issues. A further advantage of creating flexibility by this thermal storage system is that we can design our power-to-heat components smaller. If we have a storage system, it's not necessary to design the power-to-heat component for the 7 megawatt you see here in this graph, but it suffices to design it for 5.5 megawatt, as we see here, and supply the peaks from the storage system. This has the advantage that we can downsize the components and make them more cost-effective, but it also has the additional advantage that the grid connection to supply the electricity to the power-to-heat component can be significantly smaller. And this relieves the stress on the grid and reduces the requirements for build-out of the electricity grid. Implementing such a storage system with a power-to-heat component furthermore allows to optimize the electricity prices and optimize when you buy your electricity. And this makes it profitable now already. A recent study from McKinsey, for example, showed that if you have an electric boiler combined with a thermal energy storage or a heat pump with a thermal energy storage for steam production, for example, it can be now already cost competitive with a gas boiler. And if we compare it to the alternative that we first store the electricity in a battery and then later convert it into heat, we are also significantly cheaper. We can take this concept of sector coupling, of course, one step further. If we see here, for example, the combination, what I talked about before, we take electricity and convert it into heat. But if we store the heat at sufficiently high temperatures, we can, of course, also go one step further and not only use the heat, but also reconvert it into electricity and use the remaining heat just as process heat. And in this way, we basically have created a thermal battery, which can take electricity from the grid and feed it back into the grid. And by connecting it with the heating sector, we can achieve very high temperatures. And the advantage of thermal storage systems over battery systems is that in this way we have cost-effective systems which can actually provide mid to long-term storage and also bridge and create flexibilities over longer time spans. So let's have a look at where do we stand with this type of technologies. We've seen in households through the combination of heat pump and thermal storage has been rolled out quite widely. We see also that in the district heating, the use of electrical boilers in combination with heat storages is rolled out quite widely. But what is missing is, of course, a technology to transfer heat from the summer into the winter. Because our photovoltaic installations typically produce a lot of electricity in summer. In winter, however, the yield of a solar installation might be still too short, and we still need to resort to conventional technologies. So to overcome this issue at DLR, we have developed a system using limestone, which can store electrical energy from a photovoltaic installation into the chemical reaction of calcium oxide to calcium hydroxide. And since the energy is chemically bound, it can be stored over months, over weeks, and transfer basically the solar energy into the winter where it can be used for heating. We have developed the reactor to do this and demonstrated that we can run it up to 5 to 10 cycles to provide renewable heating and seasonal balancing in the electricity grid. And we're now working with multiple companies to upscale this company also to district heating purposes. So what's been working quite well at the low temperature is this rollout of power to heat with thermal storages. But what is still missing is, of course, that we need to scale up. We're talking now about projects in the megawatt, 2-digit megawatt, 3-digit megawatt hours. But if we want to replace coal plants, which are now feeding into district heatings, and above all, if you want to replace also all the industrial heat suppliers, we need to think bigger. We need to think in larger scales, and that for that, we also need to start thinking what's the next step. How can we make our storages larger? How we can scale them up, and how can we make them more cost-effective, bring the cost further down, and increase also the energy and power density so we can make them more compact and actually manage to find place for this large amount of storage systems. Above all, what we are also working on from the R&D side is to improve this concept for flexible sector coupling and understand how can we integrate these technologies, where in the energy system can we integrate them, but also what kind of business models can we create in order to generate multiple revenue streams for flexible coupling between electricity and the heating sector to get forward. At DLR, we developed different thermal storage technologies and power-to-heat components to cover this entire range, to supply heat both at low temperatures, 100 degrees, up to all the way to 1,200 degrees. For hot process gases, for example, we're working at increasing the size of fixed bed storage systems. And we worked with multiple manufacturers to come to a design that actually allows to build storages at 15 euro per kilowatt hour. Moreover, we also work on developing electric heaters, which unlock the potential for power to heat for temperatures above 800 degrees, where current technologies reach their limits, using ceramic materials which are heated either by induction or by radiation. Another technology we work on is the molten salt technologies, which can be used in the range 170 degree to 600 degree. It's quite well known in the solar sector. And what we do is systematically drive the cost down by combining the two-tank system into a single tank and replacing part of the molten salt by stones or ceramic materials, which allows to bring down the cost by 20 to 40%. Also, for this type of materials, we, of course, also have the option, on the one hand, to heat them using direct solar radiation. But also there, we can, of course, implement an electrical heater. And what we're doing there is to use our knowledge on corrosion with this type of molten salts, and also our knowledge on decomposition of this type of salt to drive the development of these electrical heaters forwards with multiple industrial partners. Here you see a test installation at Cologne. We have a 4 megawatt hour test installation where we have experience since 2009 to operate a molten salt installation, a single tank system, which contains approximately 100 tons of molten salt. Last but not least, we of course also have a lot of steam applications into the process industry. And what R&D can deliver there is that we're working at phase change materials, at storage systems which have a very high power, a high storage density, and allow to make compact systems that can deliver steam at very fast rates. Also there, of course, we work at electrification options, either with direct electrification or with heat pumps, which we then can combine with heat pumps, with storage, with repowering, and create a flexible energy system allowing to flexibly couple both the electricity and heating sector. So as take-home message, I would say I see a lot of potential for power to heat with the thermal storage to create the opportunity to not only decarbonize the heating sector, but also provide flexibility to the electricity grid at a cost-effective and environmentally friendly way so that we can achieve a reliable and stable electricity system. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, Thank you very much, Annelies van der Zicke, for this great overview and introduction in our second part. Yeah, step aside, we will talk later. And now I would like to welcome on stage Johannes Kretschmann. He is project director at Fichtner, and he will talk about use cases of concentrated solar power and heat. Now, the floor is yours.
Juliane, and yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure talking to you today. As introduced, I'm working for Fichtner, based here in Stuttgart, actually, but working globally in the field of energy and infrastructure, including concentrated solar thermal and heat. Given that today there was a lot of presentations about making use of thermal heat for district heating, but also for process heat, I would like to cover in today's presentation some of the other sectors concentrated solar power and heat is applicable for. As you can see here, the different CSP technologies can serve multiple end-use markets. I mentioned district heat and process heat, rather low to medium temperature, in case of process heat also high temperature. But then of course there's utility scale power, for which CSP is already deployed. Then there is remote area off-grid sectors, which also need to be decarbonized. And then there is the fast-growing sector of green fuel production. Looking at the different CSP/CST technologies, they all serve different operating temperatures, can be deployed with different heat transfer fluids and also different thermal energy storage systems, i.e. different CSP technologies are applicable for the different markets. But this should not be the topic of today. Today I would like in the next few minutes give you 3 examples we're currently working on for multiple end-use markets, and as said, focusing on the power and heat for utility scale, remote area power, as well as the green fuel production. Now the first example depicted here is a utility scale example from the Middle East, where we are developing for our client a CSP PV hybrid of around 300 to 500 megawatt capacity. Why a CSP PV hybrid? PV is the cheaper solar technology, as everyone knows, and in particular on sun, meaning during the day, whereas CSP offers large-scale, long-duration energy storage by means of a thermal energy storage. Combining those 2 technologies offer some advantages, and that's exactly the aim of this project, to find an optimum split between a competitive levelized cost of electricity and a sufficiently large dispatchable portion of the power generation in order to serve evening or nighttime peaks. Why nighttime peaks? If you look into the future, into the decarbonization of our networks, PV obviously plays a major role, and which pushes the residual load down during the day. Then where applicable, wind is deployed, further lowering down the residual load. The remaining residual load curve is depicted here on this graph. And that was sort of then the basis for us to conduct a optimization process for multiple CSP plant configurations, looking into different technologies, different operating regimes, all with the aim in order to have the highest cost-benefit ratio for the system. And by means of this optimization process, we found a good balance for our client between an attractive levelized cost of electricity plus sufficient dispatchability feature in the plant itself. And the lower graph here on this slide depicts exactly this. Here you see a competing conventional combined cycle, and depending on the fuel costs you take as a reference, one can see that the CSP PV hybrid power plant in the range of 50 to 60% capacity factor is competing already today with conventional power in countries in the Middle East, where there's a good solar resource on the one hand side, but then on the other hand, as we all know, also cheap fossil fuels still. And another feature depicted here on this graph is that obviously CSP, PV as a combination, but in particular the CSP component also offers additional advantages, which also need to be factored in such an assessment. So it's not a pure levelized cost assessment where you compare the one renewable energy technology with another, in which case CSP will always be the loser because it is more expensive. But if it's combined on the one hand side, but also if then the specific features CSP can offer, meaning the dispatchability first, and second, also the grid stability features CSP can offer. If this is factored in, which has been done by means of a capacity credit, basically avoiding conventional power capacity and factoring in this into the overall assessment, one can see that if CSP gets some capacity credit, it becomes even cheaper and even more competitive. And last, if one equips a CSP plant with a backup heater, which is easily doable at low cost, then it is in principle fully reliable as any other conventional power plant. And as such, one should account then for 100% capacity credit, in which case, as you can see here on the graph, the CSP option, or in this case the CSP PV option, gets really competitive. Coming now to the next end-use sector, which is remote area power generation, meaning off-grid, but of a decent size. We're not talking about single megawatt digits, where certainly CSP can't compete because of the economies of scales with the technology, because it is typically in a utility scale power plant with a significant economy of scale. So looking in this case for a 100 megawatt case study, in this case in Australia, where there's a lot of mining in remote areas with significantly high fuel costs. The study investigated, in this case, how to best decarbonize such networks, or off-grid networks. And as you can see here on the upper graph, we were looking into different electricity prices, meaning penalties, and then we, by means of a dispatch optimization and techno-economic assessment, we looked into, again, multiple technology mixes, but then also plant configurations in terms of storage sizes, solar field sizes, and so on and so forth, in order to pick the best configurations for the different boundary conditions. And the boundary conditions are such that any megawatt hour which you're not going to provide by renewables in the future, or directly by wind, solar, CSP, or PV, you need to generate by means of any backup. And given its remote area power application, already today the fuel costs or the electricity generation costs are very high. So the graph, the figures here are in Australian dollars, so please take this into consideration. But still, like, you look into significantly penalties of an average maybe $400 per megawatt hour. And if you factor this in, and if you look into even more remote areas, the higher the penalty, the more or the better for CSP in that case, meaning long duration energy storage, because then it makes more sense to reach 80+% of renewable share in this scenario. And going beyond 80%, the study showed, is the point where a developer, a mining company, should consider CSP on a case-by-case basis, because then it can certainly make sense to have CSP as part of the power mix. Certainly not as the sole technology, but in a combination either only with PV, and in cases where there's a good mix also with wind, including wind. So having all three technologies combined allows renewable energy shares up to 95, 97% even, and the last remaining few percent points, again, can be actually, in case CSP is added to the mix, be provided by means of the CSP plant, rather than having a complete separate backup generation system for the so-called Dunkelflaute, for the last remaining 3–4%. So key message here is when decarbonizing networks to 100%, one should, in sunny areas, consider CSP as part of the mix, as it can serve this last few percent points in the power generation mix. Speaking about the power generation mix, that's the second slide, the second graph here on this slide for the different cases. For an example, 90% renewable share. The generation splits are depicted here, and at the bottom you can see a typical dispatch profile for CSP PV option. Coming now to the last case study or end-use sector, which is the green fuel sector. Here on this graph, you can see a solar methanol concept, which we jointly developed with some partners. Again, it's a German-Australian collaboration. In that case, it's part of the Highgate program, which is currently being underway, which targets the green fuel production in Australia and the import of the same to Germany. The idea here is to use the power and heat coming from the CSP part to generate, on the one hand side, CO2, either by means of capturing the CO2 from a point source, for instance, a lime calcination, but then also in the future by means of direct air capture. The power and potentially heat in the future with a solid oxide electrolyzer is used to then also generate hydrogen, and both is then used as feedstock for the methanol synthesis and the methanol distillation. So again, it's a holistically optimized system which makes use both of the heat and power a CSP option can provide. And yeah, we are in the process of getting this project over the line, and hopefully can showcase this soon in Australia and with a 10 megawatt demonstration project. So that's from my side, and I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johannes. And we will talk in a second. Just go ahead there, that way, yes. And now I'm asking our next speaker on stage. It's Alf Oschatz, and he's CEO of the company SPP Sonne, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. We've learned a lot about CSP in the last presentation, and we decided to look at China at one of the prime examples where CSP enables massive PV and wind energy usage. An organization similar to the German CSP is the CSTA. It's a China Solar Thermal Alliance, and they produced a Blue Book. And the Blue Book is a document which outlines the advantages of CSP, as well as the relevance of CSP for the power generation in China. And it says after 2030, the role of CSP will become increasingly important as one of the most important technologies for replacing thermal power with renewable energy. CSP technology will become the technical path towards the dual carbon goals. And that means what we are talking about here is not only something which is relevant for the German market, but on a global scale, it is very important, and everything what we are doing makes a lot of sense. The next slide shows the solar conditions in China. It's comparable to southern Germany in parts, it's comparable to Spain, it's comparable to the best areas in the world in terms of solar energy, Chile and Namibia, and the decision to develop solar energy power stations is based on this. The next one shows the current power production in China, which is up to 5,000 terawatt hours thermal power generation, and only a small component of solar energy. By 2030, one of the goals is to reach the carbon peak in China. Afterwards, it will go down, and the objective is to be carbon neutral in 2060. This is obviously a big task, but when you look at also from a cost perspective, but on the right-hand side, you can see how the cost of the photovoltaics went down versus the cumulative capacity, and we can expect the same for CSP technologies. The current installed PV or solar power capacity in the world is 1 terawatt, and in China it's at the moment 0.4 terawatt. In 2030, China expects 0.6 terawatt, while Goldman Sachs and the World Bank estimate far higher numbers. The consequence of these 1.7 or 3.3 terawatt of renewables which will be produced is that 20% of these 3 terawatt have to be provided by using alternative technologies, and we expect 500 gigawatt of CSP or hydropower or batteries to be implemented by 2030. That's a large number. CSP technology has also advantages of not only on the actual power production, but on the power production, but it also decreases the demands in terms of very expensive transmission lines. If you see, the most power consumers in China are on the left hand, on the east side of the country, while the power production is mainly located, especially if it's solar power, mainly located on the east side on the west side of the countries. This slide shows also 3 power stations which have been already built, which are in operation, where we have supplied technology and licenses. So it's the Linga 50 megawatt, Hami 50 megawatt, and Urat. The last slide I would like to show is just about the cost, because cost is always something which is in discussion, and it shows the development of the cost of the technology in relation to the installed capacity. And it shows clearly that already now CSP is competitive and reaches globally or can be provided globally at a similar cost level as piped hydropower as far as the storage possibilities are concerned. And we expect over the next 3, 5, 7 years a significant decrease in costs. Lastly, some of the projects we have been developed and technologies we have been developed, and that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much and for this presentation. And now you stay here, and I ask my 2 other speakers, Annelies and Johannes, on stage again. Please to have a little chat. Just come over and yeah. Yeah. Okay, we've been talking a lot about projects and possibilities, but to have an idea on the market, Johannes, so you mentioned some problems, or you mentioned, where CSP has a business case, but what is the overall market situation right now for CSP?
I mean, the overall market situation is certainly focused on China as we speak right now. To give a quick summary of what happened so far, given that overall CSP is certainly lacking behind compared to some other renewables such as solar PV or wind in terms of its deployment. So currently we're looking at 6.5 gigawatt roughly installed globally. The new era of CSP started around 2005, 2006, primarily in Spain, followed then by the US, where jointly around 4 gigawatt got installed in a couple of years. And then sort of the deployment, for several reasons, kind of slowed down. One main reason was certainly that PV prices came down significantly. When I started working in CSP, in fact, CSP was the cheaper technology, but we know all that CSP came down significantly the cost curve, whereas CSP not with the same pace. And as a consequence, the deployment slowed down, and Now we're looking, as said, like the 6.5 gigawatt and a couple of other countries which started to look into CSP and deploying first projects, some of which in significant size. So currently one project gets commissioned in Dubai with a total of 900 megawatt or 950 megawatt, of which 700 are CSP based. So there is some deployment, but it's rather moderate. Now coming to China, and I think you can then mention or comment on it better, being involved in a number of projects. Also, we are involved in a few projects, but China is really now almost a secluded market for the Europeans, which is a pity because the technology got first deployed here in Europe or in the US, but then primarily in Europe. And now it is China which is taking over, which is good in the sense that more and more CSP it's getting deployed. Currently it's 3 gigawatt under construction. And also it brings down the cost curve, of course. So that's the current situation, really. What it is required is some additional proper support in terms of supporting the key benefits CSP can offer in a power mix, some of which we mentioned: dispatchable power generation, grid stability features China takes on board into their regulations and their requirements when deploying renewables.
Okay, let's have a look at that closer later. Talking about China, yes, you mentioned it. China has ambitious targets or expansion plans for CSP, and they are installing. Other markets are slowing behind. There aren't strategies. Why that? Why China? Or have you any explanation why in China do they have these plans? What can we learn from China?
Yeah, exactly. I do believe learning from China is something which is, in this case at least, it's important. And obviously there are government programs and also some regulations or measures taken and have been taken in the energy market which supports CSP. But in principle, it's when you look at the Blue Book, and I don't believe that it's a document written by let's say by a group of companies interested in a particular industry, but it's more like a comprehensive and kind of objective analysis of the current situation, and CSP has advantages together with other technologies, and the combination of CSP and PV, which is deployed at the moment, is a response to many questions or many problems which are usually associated with renewable energies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really the point where there's too much of variable renewable energies in the network. I mean, obviously, battery energy storage is now also quite competitive, and there are large battery energy systems being deployed. And in many countries lacking a solar resource, that's certainly also a good path forward. We do think, though, and our studies show that in sunny countries, CSP is or shall be part of the power mix, and has some value to add and is competitive. So beyond a certain number of storage hours, depending on the boundary conditions, plus 8 hours roughly, CSP becomes competitive when compared to some wind PV BESS systems. Plus then offering other features such as frequency control in networks. There are means of incorporating clutches into the powertrain between the turbine and the generator, and hence a CSP plant, even though it's maybe only operated 8 or 10 hours a day, can still serve this grids or provide these grid services 24/7. And that's something what, as said, like needs to be always looked at holistically, and that's something where we see some improvement. So there are more and more countries looking into that option, But at the same time, a lot of countries are still at the beginning of deploying on large-scale renewables. And of course, they deploy first PV, wind, to a certain share in the network. And then when it becomes tricky in terms of keeping the network stabilized, then CSP comes on the play.
Okay. Talking about competitiveness and bringing forward the technology, what can research do to support that and bringing prices down or costs down?
Yeah, exactly. So I think the key exactly is to bring prices down, and what they're basically two ways to go. It's like one is just working on new working fluids, which allow to push up the temperature of the heat collection, let's say, and increase the efficiency of the power part. So that's where we institutes like DLR are like working on increasing the temperatures that you can operate molten salts up to 600 degrees, or using chloride salts, which can go up to even 700 degrees. So that's one way to go. And of course, bringing down the cost of the storage component is also an important part. It's like the main asset of a solar plant, that you can actually have the storability. So that's where we try. I mean, the two-tank molten salt concept is kind of the standard in the sector. But the cost can still be reduced significantly if we combine these two tanks into one and put fillers in between. And we demonstrated that it works, and now we're still working on improving that and improving also the durability, both of the storage components as well as the electricity components, or the electrical heaters. And I think that's where we are like innovating with new materials, innovating with new designs, which then can bring down the cost much farther.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, after few hours talking. No, and where do you see the biggest potential now of improvement or development in the storage?
In the storage, in both. Yeah, I think especially if connected to CSP, I think it's also, we've developed quite a few solutions, but the market is, so I think the next step is to actually implement them, to actually test these electrical heaters on larger scales, to scale them up, so we can get it into the market and can profit from these developments. And I think that's an area where we just need courage also to try and implement it, maybe also support from the governments to try out new technologies, and partners willing to try it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have heard a lot of these buzzwords in your speeches, like sector coupling, flexibility, and so on. They are important, we all know that, but I got the impression that it's not always appreciated, the flexibility, that the sectors are still looked at really isolated, and the systems are not flexible. What would you see can be improved of, or are they appreciated, these features, sector coupling, or?
I think it depends a little bit on what you look at. If we talk about flexibility in the context of solar power plants, they're connected to the electricity grid, so it's a lot of market design. The colleagues can probably comment on that a lot. If we look at industrial applications, we usually have the problem that a lot of the, let's say, the power to heat component, the heat generation is behind the meter, and there's no incentive to actually act flexible. The technology is there, but as long as there's no market design where this flexibility is actually recompensated, or there's a flexible electricity price which motivates the user to actually operate flexibility, so there's a need for restructuring this incentive, so it's actually exploited all the potential of flexibility we have there.
Okay, I see you nodding. Who wants first? Okay, go ahead.
I would say it's, I mean, at the moment the world is facing big problems and big questions, and the response to these questions is not always the market and very small responses from a few companies. I do believe it requires a bigger, more comprehensive approach, maybe a European approach. If you look at China, they are transferring energy over thousands of kilometers, and we could do the same, for example, from Spain to Western Europe, or to Middle Central Europe, or to Eastern Europe, and I believe there's probably some more regulation required, or more support from the governments, not only one, in order to make it more successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can only agree that it requires specific incentives. I mean, it's also still the deployment of a relatively new technology. Of course, there are technologies in the mix which are now deployed in 50 plus commercial power plants. But then going the next steps, using more efficient systems, high temperature storage systems, that will then bring down the cost curve, and to deploy these systems is the one hand side, so that's more like a project-specific demonstration. But then on the other hand, to have some market mechanisms, some auctions with some feasible boundary conditions in terms of the PPA or the durations for either then the incentive or the PPA terms, which generally should be at least 15 years plus, more like in the range of 20 years, in order to facilitate the deployment of CSP. And then another key point for me is in respect to the actual expansion planning. I mean, having sector coupling incorporated makes the overall expansion modeling even more complex. There are then other layers when it comes now to the energy transition in Europe. We learn it now, unfortunately, that energy security, supply chain security is key. And that's why I'm always saying there's not one single silver bullet, or maybe only not 2 or 3. There are many in order to reach our targets. And as said, like for long duration energy storage in the power mix, CSP can be an option, where if the solar resource is decent, that's sufficient in Spain, sufficient in southern Northern Africa, in Australia, South America, in the US in parts, so there are in the Middle East, of course. So there are multiple areas which can serve sort of as hubs, and then depending on the technologies deployed, can then also be used as part of the power mix locally in order to serve other parts which are lacking the renewable energy resource to provide either direct current or green fuels, you name it, but to look into the power mix.
Mm-hmm. And would you say, like, I mean, I know the European Union is working on a new electricity market design and others are looking at the designs. Would you say that a lot of governments are on the right track to see it, or is it, are we far away, or what are the governments who are, where are the markets right now? Who wants to? We know China, yes, but apart from that.
Yeah, I mean, projects we are involved, they are in Southern Africa, Northern Africa, but they are more sort of single projects rather than programs. We are active in the Middle East. In some of the large-scale green hydrogen projects where we also talk about multiple gigawatts, CSP is considered as part of the power mix where it makes sense. We do see some positive developments in Australia. So given the prime solar resource, Australia was so far lacking behind, but there hopefully soon there will be also a first commercial size CSP plant be deployed. So yeah, outside China there's some slow developments, but I mean, what makes me look promising into the future in terms of CSP, because I mean, in the end, I'm technology agnostic. I mean, we need to decarbonize whatever technology fits best should be deployed. But looking into the outlooks from ARENA or the EIA, in all of those net zero or announced pledges scenarios, there's a significant deployment of CSP. The reality is lacking behind because, for instance, even if you take the announced pledges, which won't bring us to the Paris targets, we would look at 35 gigawatt by 2030 of CSP deployment. At the moment, we are at 6.5, another 3 being deployed, so we are maybe in 25 at 10, but not at 35. So. Yeah, let's see whether there's a push. I don't see it yet, but given the challenges and given the benefits the technology can offer, it might be that there's a second life or second push in terms of the technology.
Yeah. we learned this morning, not only in CSP, we are off track. So it's everywhere we have to do. I will do a last round now, starting with you. Your wish to policymakers to make your life easier in your work or bringing forward the storage technologies you're working for.
Well, I think I see a lot of potential in combining this electricity, or especially if we're going to electrify heating, there's a lot of potential in using the synergies between electricity and heating. But a lot of the discussions and a lot of the discussions also about how to change the market design are still geared with this very strong focus on electricity. So my wish would be that we also broaden the scope a little bit and take this big challenge of decarbonizing the heating also into this type of discussions.
Yeah, and I can just, in brackets, I've been to the Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue 2 days, the real conference, and for the first time ever, there was a panel on heat. So we one step forward. We start to talk about it. Your wish to policymakers?
As I said before, I do believe there's a view at the bigger picture required, and I do believe, or I trust, there will be a big development on CSP in China. It will happen, and if we as Europeans or as other regions are not trying to keep up with it and to participate, then from an economic point of view, everything will become Chinese, or it will be dominated by China. And I think we are not, at the moment you said, and you are right, it's about 7 gigawatt at the moment. So the development is not that far. And there should hopefully a possibility to participate and to use our existing knowledge and experience to bring it forward, and also to participate on the development on a global scale.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I actually fully agree. I mean, there are great research organizations such as DLR and Fraunhofer in Germany, but then also in Europe, in Spain in particular, but also Italy, France. So there's a lot of know-how and a lot of actually taxpayer money being spent over the last 20, 30 years in the industry. There was, even in Germany, not deploying any CSP, I mean, now slowly starting in the heat sector, but let's say on a global scale, rather a niche market. There are still quite a few companies such as SPP and others offering the technology. And I mean, we should learn our lesson. In case of PV, it was also the Europeans which were in the driver's seat for some time, and then we let it go, and now I think nearly 90% of the supply chain is Chinese, and now we pay the bill, and we spend big money in order to get industry back to Europe. In case of CSP and CST, the industry is still there. If we support it in Europe, but also generally in terms of the deployment, I think that could also be part of the growing sector. It's a massive challenge to tackle the overall energy transition. There are certain skill sets which might be applicable for more or technology which is closer to the conventional power sector, which is decreasing in size, and hence also the skill sets there need to be utilized, and there is a shortage of skilled people. So my message to the politicians is diversify. Diversify in order to tackle our challenge, and that both in terms of the local markets itself, but then also in terms of the supply chain. Because I had 2 days ago a discussion about the deployment of solar heat in Europe. We can do it today, 100% European, which is not the case for a lot of technologies.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope the message is spread. We will do our very best to spread it even more. Thank you very much to all of you. And we will now continue with the next panel. And we will have a quick change in speakers here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will now continue moving from infrastructure in power. We will move to infrastructure of the heat sector. And I'm very happy to welcome our first speaker in this second and last round. And it's Lena Marie Brenner, and she's team leader development of renewable sector coupling and heat projects for GP Joules. And she will talk about carbon neutral heating, exploring sector coupling strategies for municipalities. The floor is yours, Lena Marie.
Thank you a lot. Yeah. The last half year in Germany, we challenged really high energy prices. The consumers and the companies had difficulties to pay their energy bills. At the same time, we drastically need to reduce our CO2 emissions to fight climate change. So most current energy systems rely on fossil fuels. They are expensive and they're harmful for the environment. So switching and implementing renewable energy is challenging for the customers. But what if we could solve this problem by coupling the sectors? Yes. So I want to talk about a project we started 2 years ago in Tomading. It's a small village in Germany. Back then, we had 90% of the heating system by fossil fuels. So we have a quite high CO2 emission and a really high primary energy consumption. And how did we change the system? We implemented a photovoltaic system. It is around 3.6 hectares. And with this photovoltaic system, we produce CO2 neutral energy. We use it for the industry. We can use it for the electric mobility. And the clue of the system is that we can store the energy in our district heating system. That means that, of course, photovoltaic systems don't produce the energy when it's needed. So we can produce with this CO2 neutral electricity via the heat pump. We produce warm water. We store it in the network and in a really big thermal energy storage. If there's the so-called in Germany Dunkelflaute and we don't have any electricity, we can combine the photovoltaic system with a wind turbine. Or the alternative is that we can combine it with a wood chip heating system or a combined heat and power plant as we did it in Tomading. In total, we can save in Tomading 77% of the CO2 emission. If we have 100% CO2 neutral electricity in the net in Germany, it would be any CO2 emission anymore. And even the primary energy consumption is 72% less. So that's all from my side. And I'm really looking forward for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lena Marie. Just step aside and we will talk later. And now I welcome our next speaker. It's Johannes Schröfer from the company Kraftanlagen, Energies and Services. And he will talk about Green Heat Module, the e-thermal battery for retrofitting CHP plants with PV and wind. The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm talking about the Green Heat Module today. What is the Green Heat Module? The Green Heat Module is the solution to decarbonize heavy industry. What we deploy is renewable energy. The renewable energy is volatile, intermittent. So we convert the renewable energy when the energy is producing, when PV is producing, convert the renewable electricity into heat with electric heaters, and store the high temperature heat in a thermal energy storage. We do this up to temperatures of 1000 degrees C and with power to heat efficiencies of 95%. So the combination of renewables plus the green heat module equals the same level of service as fossil fuel, with advantage not emitting any CO2. So at the end, we talk about large-scale thermal energy storage. The storages which are deployed today are hot water storages in the cities. These are commercially available. On the other side, we talk a lot in the newspapers about green hydrogen, but they have the disadvantage that they are too costly. That's why they are not deployed in the last 30 years. So the next logical step is that we increase the temperatures in a thermal energy storage as we do in hot water storages with a better exergy level. So coming to the case, in Germany, we don't have the solar irradiation as we have in Spain, so we cannot build beautiful CSP plants. But we can take the advantages of CSP plants to Germany. How we do it? We take the thermal energy storage and put them in parallel of combined heat and power plants, typically consisting of a gas turbine, heat recovery steam generator, and steam turbine. With this, we produce process heat for the industry or district heating for cities and electricity with a very high efficiency. By doing the installation of a green heat module in parallel of a gas turbine, we can also connect the green heat module to the same heat recovery steam generator. So it's just an adapter solution. It's an adapter solution for any CHP plant, whether it is in the industry or it is in the city. When we charge the green heat module, we take photovoltaic and wind. Both, when you combine them in Germany, you have full load hours of 2,500 to 3,500 relative to the dimension. Integrating a green heat module and over-dimensioning the renewables allows to produce directly electric power, but at low cost, and the surplus to be stored in the green heat module, featuring later the heat recovery steam generator. When PV and wind is not producing, then you feed the heat recovery steam generator, and the steam generator feeds the turbine as the turbine did in the last 100 years. So you combine the best of the two worlds. In future, when we think of the role of combined heat and power plants, especially in the cities, they are the backbone today. When PV and wind are not producing, we cannot say to the people, no problem, it's a little bit colder in the room for the next 3 to 4 weeks, but it's okay, people would not accept. So combined heat and power plants do the service today, but they need to decarbonize themselves on one hand, but on the other hand, they are very, very, very cost effective and highly dispatchable. Today, this is given by the gas turbine, which we can use only a few hours for the Dunkelflaute, we say in Germany, so when PV and wind are not producing. And maybe we really achieve to bring hydrogen to even to the energy level, not only to the material level in 2050. Then you could even operate gas turbines on a large scale. I do not say demonstration plants or demo plants. So to conclude, green heat module or thermal batteries, including electric heaters, are the economic backbone in the energy transition on short term. They are available, they are cheap, they are easy to integrate, it's a retrofit solution, and you can combine the existing infrastructure on a step-by-step approach. You do not need to replace the whole equipment and hope for technology breakthroughs. You install modular, and then step by step, you can decarbonize your existing assets. And we do not have any limits for steam. No limits. Green steam, up to 300 bars, 620 degrees C, without any limits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johannes.
You're welcome.
We will talk with you in 5 minutes because we have now our last speaker on stage, and it's Thomas Venn. There has been a little switch in speaker, and he's from the company Aztec, mother company of SolarLight that was announced in the program. So you will talk about district heating with concentrated solar thermal. Here you go.
Thank you. My name is Thomas Venn from the company Aztec. It's the mother company of SolarLight. And I will talk about our technology very briefly, and then talk about how we can integrate this technology in district heating, for instance. We have some active projects that are going on now. So what we do is we have a parabolic trough, and we use this technology that has been known for quite a while, for decades now. But in the past, it always was used to generate power, and we are using it to generate heat, because it's the first thing you do with the trough. It's generating heat. So anything up to 420 degrees, 420 degrees C, is achievable for us also. And this is the difference between us and most companies doing this. We're also doing this in the north of Europe, or in the west of Europe. Like in Belgium, we could do it in Germany. The DNI levels are similar, so no reason why we couldn't do it. We have some sites that are active now. Atpo and Proviron were our two first sites in 2019, both consisting of 1,000 square meters. So it was, let's say, it is a commercial operational plant, but it was like to show the world that it could have been done in this latitude of the world. After we have shown it and proven the technology works, we are now in the commissioning of Avery Dennison, which is 5,500 square meters, and we're building the Hanneke plant, which is 43,000 square meters in Seville. So when I say we have proven ourselves in Northern Europe, you can see here are two diagrams that really show what we are doing. The left diagram, you can see the darker dots on the diagram are the dots that are showing what we're actually getting, and the lighter dots is what we thought we would be getting, what we calculated. So we're actually overperforming, which is, of course, nice to see. And if you then look at the other diagram, you see that we are producing steam on a freezing day in wintertime. We are still able to produce steam because we're not depending on ambient temperatures. We can produce our steam whenever we have sunshine, also in wintertime. So we have successfully demonstrated that we can operate these plants unmanned and therefore increase the efficiency and decrease the costs. Another thing that I would like to talk about is then how are we going to use this, for instance, in a district heating plant or anything that has temperatures up to 90, 95 degrees. We can very easily use our parabolic troughs, put them in a field, and use them to heat up seasonal storage, a pit storage, which is a big vessel of water that we heat up to 95 degrees, and from there we can deliver this energy to the grid. And as long as we are in a radius of, let's say, 1 to 2 kilometers away from the feeding point, this is a feasible solution we can do. And yeah, so it's off-the-shelf technology where we're driving down the costs, and we're able to, like this, we're able to really get the cost down and do it on a green way. So this was very shortly my presentation.
Yeah, thank Thank you very much. Am I online? Yes, now I am. Thank you very much, Thomas, for this brief last presentation. And I ask Lena Marie, sorry, and Johannes on stage again, and we will have a little discussion on district heating with renewables and energy storage. So just one question that is always coming up with solar thermal. Doesn't it cover a lot of land, or do you need a lot of space? Well, where do I get the space from?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's true. People have the idea that we use huge surfaces, and we do need our land. But if you see at the energy output that we generate on our land, it's 3 times higher than what you would get with PV panels. So we are very energy efficient in the square meters that we use. Moreover, you can also integrate our system together with the windmills, for instance, because the shade that the windmill is dropping on our field doesn't have the big impact that it has on PV modules, you know. So it's, yeah, we need land. It doesn't need to be prime location land, so it can be at the side of a freeway, for instance, and it's a relatively efficient way to use your land in the end of the day.
Okay, flexibility is everything. So I asked this morning people, how is your business going in the last month, that everyone is talking about heat now. So what is your, or what are you up to now? How are things going?
Yeah, business is going very well. I think before the attack from Russia on Ukraine, the people were like thinking, okay, I have my independent heating system if I use oil or gas. And now they recognized, okay, I need a supplier for oil, gas, and fossil fuels as well. And they really want to have a future-proof heating system. So, and of course, CO2 prices are rising, so they are looking for efficient and cost-effective system. And that's why I think a lot of consumers looking for another possibility to produce heat. And of course, there is the ban of fossil heating systems as well now. And even a lot of communities are calling us and ask for, can you please change our heating system? We want to have a district heating system in 2 months. Can we do something? So I think there's...
Can you in 2 months?
No. So it needs like 1.5 years or 2 years. Still, we can start our heating system or start it running. So it's going very well, and we are, like the company is growing fast because we want to make it possible. So to give our part to 100% renewables.
Okay, yeah. What is your situation right now? How are things going? Is the market booming, or what is the potential?
On the power to heat side, so when we talk about electrode boilers, so really using the green electricity directly converted into steam, this business is very well. When it comes really to bulk energy storage, really to significantly decarbonization, let's say we have 2 groups of industrial customers. One, they are just staying on the sofa and praying that everything goes back in the old times. And the others, let's say the front runners, they come not from a cost optimization point of view, they come from a very strategic point of view, and typically about long-term decarbonization. So they are prepared, they know the technology, they know the energy system, they know the regulation, they know funding regimes, and they see investment completely different because they see it in 2 phases. There's the payback period and then the period after the payback. And this is, let's say, the golden end. And when you have a payback time of, let's say, 5 to 12 years, depending on the project, then the golden duration, let's say, of the investment can be very, very long. And it's a permanent cost reduction plus independency. So it's increasing cost control and at a lower level. But for this, you need really visionary C-level. The typical CFO is not the right person, let's say.
Okay. Thomas, what is your experience? Do you find a lot of visionary CFOs?
Well, I share the same experience a bit, you know. What we are also doing a lot is giving of contracts that are heat as a service, so that we provide a certain price for their heat, which is typically lower than what they're paying for gas. And even then we get questions like, what is the return on investment? Well, there is no investment, so you don't have a return on investment. You know, it's hard for some CFOs to break through that thinking of how we operate our system. And as you say, I mean, if your payback time is 5 years or 10 years, depending on the configuration of the system, and your life expectancy of your entire system is 40 years, then you have, in our case, you have 30 years of free energy. I mean, it's
Yes.
If you buy it and if you do the heat as a service contract, you can say, all right, my price point is for 25 years, it's fixed. So this is a big draw for them. Nevertheless, a lot of people are hesitant, and we need the first brave ones to go into this market. And we see that once we have these first brave ones to go into the market, then that niche market really develops, and the customer starts coming to us. So that lightens the workload for sales a bit, you know.
Okay, yeah. We hopefully, after this session, even more. Yeah, I would really like to stress the fact what you just said, because people are thinking in short-term periods, and they are looking at payback times, but then what comes after? Usually in a fossil system, you have to continue to pay, yeah, after that payback time.
Yeah. Yeah.
With renewables, you don't. But do your clients understand that?
Yeah,
the clients, yes, probably, but
yeah, for our system, works a bit different, because we have like small companies in every village who runs the district heating system, and for the consumers, they have to pay really low installation costs. They don't need a lot of space. They don't have to care for the system, but they have still to pay every kilowatt hour they use.
Okay, yeah. But another question to you, because we started talking about district heating, and what is the great advantage of district heating over single solutions for housing?
Yeah, if you look at the whole system, if you couple the sectors, it's really nice, because you have a really cheap opportunity to storage energy, because hot water is way cheaper than like to store electricity. The efficiency of the system is way better if you have a big heat pump or industrial one than if you have a small one in every house. So these are for the whole system the big advantages, but for the consumers, they don't have to change anything on their building. It's just like a plug-and-play solution. They don't have to look for new windows or new floor heating or stuff like this. And it's CO2 free, so that's a really important one. And as I mentioned before, you don't need a lot of space, and you don't have to care for your heating system anymore. So it's careless for them.
Okay. Now we understood the great technologies, but what are the challenges to get them into the market? Johannes, what are you struggling with, basically?
The biggest challenge from my side, or what I see, is perception and attention for the new technologies. And this is, on one side, people using energy. So they really get in touch, oh, I'm responsible for my heating system, whether it's the emissions or whether it's dependency when it comes to cash flows. Light tower projects, So when we come to companies, they would like, do you have a reference, you know? And when it's outside, it's quite different. So people try to adapt or copy. So light towers are important. And we need a kind of culture that renewables and sector coupling must come first. So we really need to put the renewables first and use the sector coupling that we really can create our own mines of resources, because this is really a historic chance now that we can create our own energy source. And only with sector coupling, it's possible not to use it only in electricity, but also to use it in the heat sector. And this is a historic chance also for the industry, because the ones who go fast through are more competitive. And alongside, we need also the value-added chain that is prepared for the new technologies. For example, we come to engineering bureaus, and they are technology, or they like technologies. And sometimes they do not know really the last state of technology. Or the technical leaders in companies, they do not know the last state of technologies. They come with this, let's say, more or with the technologies which they know from the past. And this mindset to think out of the box, so not only in my heat problem, but also in my electricity supply problem, and integrate it in a total energy environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. What are you?
Yeah, I mean, I can only underline what you said. But these are the external things that are challenges. But I think we, as a sector, also have to look internally and what do we need to do to be even more able to go to the markets and to be even more, persistent in this. And I think the cost is, of course, everything. And I've said it before, and I'm repeating myself, but we have to drive the cost down. In the end of the day, everybody cares about the environment, but everybody cares about their wallet even more. So we should really, I mean, there's only one way to do this. We're behind on the Paris agreements, as we know. We learned today. We are. It's not looking very good, but on the optimistic side is that we have technologies ready to roll out, and they are very cost efficient. So I mean, we just have to keep on pushing and keep on working at it.
Yeah. Okay. What is your main constraint at the moment? Where would you have to push more?
Yeah, as I said before, the communities really want to have district heating, so that's not our problem at the moment. So we know how to do it, we know it, we have the technologies, but we need the people who want to implement the system, who have the know-how how to do it. So if you're looking for a job, feel free. Yeah, that's our main topic at the moment, that we need employees. They are really motivated and want to join us on our journey. And of course, we need funding from the government to rely on, that's going to be there for district heating and not for fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Would you agree subsidies is key to bring costs down?
Yes, well, it is in a first stage. If you get subsidies in the first years of development, of course you need it to develop a certain volume. But after a while, you should get a project pipeline that ensures your suppliers that you are taking off a lot of quantities, so you can, again, press the prices down. And I think the end goal should be that we are cheaper than gas without subsidies. I mean, it's realistically, we're capable to do it, I think. For some alternative energy, I think they're getting there, and we as well with CSP, CST, we need to get there, and we're good en route. Give us a few more years, and we're there, I think.
Okay, so if you say we have to get there, what do you have in the pipeline? What is coming next, or what will we hear from you?
So we are hoping that we will be able to increase our project pipeline. So we will have 100,000 square meters order intake this year, which, if you look at the project I showed you, is a huge increase in pipeline. And we will also focus on integrating other sources, like, for instance, wind, which is a very nicely fitting production curve when you take it with solar. So solar and wind it's a very nice marriage. These are things that we think we will, the way the future will be, I think.
Okay. We will do the last round of questions as I did before. In your opinion, what do we need now to accelerate heat transition, or the transition in the heat sector? What is the most important thing to do now?
For me, it's that the decision makers need to understand that any support is an investment. So at the end, as you said, it pays off, or as you said in the district heating, it pays off itself. This value added should enable the decision makers to set the right frameworks, to put renewables and sector coupling first, but also to adapt the existing supporting regimes which are there for fossil, reduce the subsidies on the fossil side, and take these subsidies to foster the new ones, the new technology ones, and people will follow. Because it's also important that the investors see, okay, it's not only the company which is approaching this, it's a society wishing to have such systems. And from my point of view, this is very important. We need to educate. It's we need to educate the clients. We need to listen to the clients, to adapt the system, to bring the costs down. And with this, I believe we are very close already, especially now, with gas prices of 5 cents. When I think of CO2 and CO2 prices, I'm very positive. But we cannot wait another 10 years, and this I'm very, very afraid of. Mm-hmm. So that's why we need to push and demonstrate that we are open. Huh?
Thomas, in your opinion, what do we need to do? What do policymakers need to do to accelerate?
Yeah, I think it was said earlier on this panel as well. The CO2 taxes that we have, the ETS scheme that we have, it needs to be more broadened so that every CO2 that you're emitting should be taxed, I think, because he who pollutes has to pay for the pollution that he's causing. I think it's a logical stance. So this would help us. On the other hand, as this is getting done, we should also bear in mind that to develop projects, you sometimes need very locally obtained permits and knowledge, and sometimes this puts us on a track of a development of years, or years. And we don't really have that time anymore. We really need a fast track for all these kind of things to really push our projects to the market. We have clients that are interested, but they have to wait a year for a permit. This could be done a bit faster, I think.
Okay. You wish to accelerate the heat transition and to accelerate your business, Lena Marie.
Yeah, there were already good points. So what can I add? Maybe I think it would be really helpful if we have strong decisions maker. They say, okay, that's the path we want to go, and the people can follow. Like now, it sometimes feel like people are confused. They know, okay, do we want 100% renewable energy, or are we still going back to gas, or what is the plan? So the industry seems to look. Are we going to have this big investment, or should we still wait? Because what is the plan of the government? So I think we need a straight path towards 100% renewable energy.
Okay, and so we hope we will do that. Thank you very much, you three, Thomas Wenn, Lena Marie Brenner, and Johannes Schröfer, for this last round. Thank you very much. And now I ask you kindly to make space for my colleague Beatrice German Storage Association, because we are now about to conclude this event today. We started with, with a message that can make us a bit afraid. We are off track. There is lots to do. But now, after having seen a lot of solutions, a lot of possibilities how to get back on track, how to decarbonize the heat sector, but also the power sector with certain thermal technologies, we can be positive and optimistic to get back on that track. I hope everyone out there in the audience got some inspiration for the everyday work and to create a green future, as a motto of the Berlin Energy Transition was. Just one little indication, we will have all the presentations online soon. We will communicate it throughout all our channels, and there will be also the whole sessions online in video streaming on the Volta-X website. We will also send the link around. From my side, I wish you all the best, and I say goodbye for today, and I give the word to Beatrice now for the last word. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I had a great time joining, and I hope everyone else got the message too and has seen that there's a broad bandwidth of solutions which are viable today, cost-effective, sustainable, and also really flexible, being able to integrating renewables or providing renewable process heat. And yeah, I hope that you get into touch with us afterwards. We will send out our contact details as well. So if you want to talk to the companies presenting today or to us, we are happy to do so. Also, a big thank you to the team from Messe Stuttgart and also the technical team organizing the whole stream. And yes, also a big thank you to our partners, the Energy Storage Technology Collaboration Program from the International Agency, as well as the Solar Paces program from there as well. So that's for it today. I hope you have a great evening, lunch, or wherever you are, and goodbye.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.